All right, everybody, welcome to the meeting for the special city council workshop, December 8th, 2023. Mrs. Hilbrick, will you please call roll?
Hello?
Hello. Hello.
Councilman De La Garza?
I'm present.
Councilwoman Solis?
Here.
Councilman Crocker?
Here.
Councilwoman Scott?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Young?
Here.
Councilman Lofgren?
Here.
And Mayor Bachnight.
Here. And if everyone will please rise for the pledges, followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you. All right. I don't have an agenda in front of me, so I'm going to have to rely on the screen here. So, do we have items from council? Oh,
Citizens communication as well.
oh, thank you. All right. Any announcements and/or reminders, Mr. Garza?
No, sir. I could repeat all the ones I said Tuesday about Mary on Main this weekend, but I hope by now everybody's aware of those events taking place this evening and tomorrow.
I saw them setting up today. Looks
Yes,
like
sir.
it'll be quite the event. Merry Christmas to everybody.
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.
And we'll go into items from council. Oop. All right, we'll close items from council and open citizens communication. Anybody wishing to address the city council can step forward to the microphone. Seeing no one jump up, we're good. We'll close citizens communication and jump right into city manager reports. Mr. Garza, your floor.
All right, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you and welcome to another round of a council workshop. We have several heavy topics to discuss with you this afternoon, and so we'll jump right into it. As I alluded to on Tuesday, when you approved proceeding with the issuance of the upcoming COs, it was appropriate timing to now have, of course, Gilbert talk to you more about what happens next and what the next several years look like as it relates to debt capacity, especially since, as you know, going into fiscal year 25, we're going to be adding a few years to our CIP planning window. And so thus, that makes it even more important to understand where we stand financially. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Gilbert.
Good afternoon, Council. Is this clear? On? Thank you, thank you. Okay, I'm gonna try something new. Usually I'm in front. They don't want me in front anymore. But okay, we can work with that. All right, here's the gadget. Okay. Let's go into the COs and GOs, usually the CO side of it. Real quick, not planning to spend a lot of time, but it's more a refresher because a lot of public is watching this too as well. As you well know, to have a well-balanced debt management plan, which is associated to your debt capacity, you have to make sure everything's in balance. What I mean by that is everything been looked at. You got your proposed tax rate. What are we proposing? Because when you do a debt capacity assumption, you propose a certain tax rate. Bond redemption. Are we doing any bond redemptions? Any new debts can be an issue, but not only ours. You got to keep in mind there's other governmental entities out there that issue debt besides us, and you got one taxpayer paying all of that. The status of the economy has to go as part of the Balancing Act. The status of the interest rates in the current market, as you well know. The taxpayer. A good example is that, currently our appraisals went up close to 20%, but I pretty bet that their per capita income or their disposable income didn't go up that much either. So those are the things we got to keep in mind. Of course, your appraisals. So basically, you got a whole pie you got to think about when you decide when it's the right time to sell debt and everything else. But I have some assumptions played in that are very conservative that allows you over the past 20 years to do it. And I'll talk about it in a minute. Oh, that's the wrong one. Try this one. All right. On the left-hand side, I'm not used to standing still, sorry, folks. On the left-hand side is your annual debt service. On the right-hand side is your outstanding principal as of 9/30, okay? I can't stand it, I'm sorry. All right, this feels more normal to me. As you can see, our annual debt service has gone from, for 24, 6.7. Oh, I went too fast. This side is before we sell the bonds, your debt service. And same thing on the principal. Now, I hit the thing accidentally. After we sell the bonds, sometimes in late, mid-February, we might be looking at an annual debt service going from a 6.7 to close to $11 million. And of course, on your outstanding debt as of 9/30, it's going to jump over $50 million because of our bond issue. Remember, that's of 9/30 at the end of the year. Now, keep in mind, I've been looking at the market. These numbers were played out. I developed these about 5 months ago. As you well know, the markets back then were kind of high. I think Dusty hit on that this past Tuesday. So I kind of looked at it again. If everything stays constant the way it is now, or even go lower, we can look at about a $200,000 drop off those numbers up here, okay? So that means we go back to the same status quo we were a year ago, okay? Questions? I know the numbers look bad, but folks, we did have a high debt service before this drop. Okay. Questions? None? Awesome. All right, let's talk.
Can you go back real quick?
For you, yes.
Thank you. But even though debt service payments would go up, you're still seeing a trend downward, over the course of the next 5 to 10 years. And so keep that in mind as we continue the conversation, is that there's still obviously some debt capacity coming up, even though.
Now, that's a very good point. And part of the presentation, you're going to see that capability show up later on in the slides. But not only that, Jesus, I thought you were going to say this.
I
Your
can't say
tax rate.
everything.
I know, I'm sorry. It's hard to transmit it. Folks, you were dealing in a 20-cent tax rate and a debt tax rate. You dropped it down to 19 cents, okay? Not only that, the taxpayers are spending less tax dollars, okay? So that's pretty good. That you're able to sell that quantity of bonds, have a lower tax rate, and still save a little couple of dollars on the taxpayer. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Good. See, I thought you were going to talk about that. It's okay. We can't all get all of it. All right. In order to talk with debt capacity, there's some assumptions we got to play out. We got to talk about the growth rate or tax appraised value. And we got to talk about the tax rate. Now, this is what I was talking about. In 24, we saw a growth, approximately 20% growth. I was using a 4% growth last time we were talking here. Remember that? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm not changing my mind how I'm going forward. I'm still taking a very conservative approach. I'm taking a 3, a 2.5, and still dropping. The further I go, I'm dropping down to 1%. I'll say, Gilbert, why are we doing that? In the past 2 years, we had over 10% growth. And I wish somebody asked me because I wanted. Great question.
Why are we doing that, Gilbert?
Excellent question. Thank you. Thank you. One, it creates flexibility. As you well know, I used a 4. It came in at 20. You were allowed to issue more debt, remember? The public safety building, it was around the 40s. I had to add another 10 to it. You had the capability to do that without affecting the tax rate, right?
Okay.
Not only that, you dropped the tax rate. And you were able to redeem some bonds. So by having a very conservative growth rate, it gives you that cushion to play around. And I think you can go back 15 or 20 years, and all these growth rates will allow you to achieve a lower debt tax rate because you had created that flexibility to move around when the true appraisals come in. So let's say the appraisal come in at 4 or 5. You got that flexibility. You can say, I don't want to sell bond, that's fine. But guess what? I can have more cash on the table. I can redeem some more bonds, pay off faster. Or you lower the tax rate even more. Make sense? But right now, I'm assuming a 19 cents tax rate. But again, I'm going to qualify. Again, over the years, I say we assume this level, it's always dropped because of the price values, okay? All right. With that scenario established, oh, got the wrong one. That's my mouse. It is my mouse, see? Anyway, you create this scenario. Here's your debt capacity over the next 10 years, assuming a certain type of interest rate and everything else, and a growth rate on your appraisals. In 25, 7.5, 22.4, and so on out towards this year. Here's the big one. And this is what Mr. Garza was talking about. You're still going to have this represents drop in your debt, technically. And what this telling you, it drops, but you can come back and sell so much money without affecting the tax rate. Does that make sense? Yeah. Now, to keep it easy and clean, okay, nope, back. Thank you, sorry. James, anyway, I gotta blame somebody. As I had before, this line represents your debt service after you sell the bonds in February, okay? Assumes that we sell the bonds and now this is your new debt service on an annual basis. We know and have a good chance it's not gonna be that much, it's gonna drop some. But for right now, let's make that assumption. Now, if we go forward and say, hey, Gil, let's go ahead and show me the debt service gonna be if I move forward and I sell all these bonds in each given year. Then that would look like this. That's dash line, that's your new debt service if you decide to sell each of one of these bond issues. So your debt service will be jumping up to $12 million. Does that make sense? That's when you go wild and crazy. Yeah, let's sell it. And those who've been here a while, I think Ms. Scott, and we used to do that when we had so much capacity that we sell it all. And not really, nothing against prior administrations, that there's needed some time, and I believe that you need to think your whole process out and see how that fits in with a true CIP process. And that's what we're trying to do here. But that's what it looks like if we go forward and we sell all this bond in each given year. And point taken here is that you're going to hire, your debt service will still be around 11 to eventually get to $12 million if you go that route. Well, what do you suggest, Gilbert? Well, good question. Let's focus on the next 5 years to keep it simple, okay? 25, 26, 27, 20, 29, okay? I'm suggesting, as you well know, let's do a very aggressive bond redemption program. Let me back up real quick. What I wanted to show you is that in this window that we're currently talking about for our CIP 25 to 26, I want to smooth this out a little bit. I don't want to sell 27 if I don't need to. I want to try, let's have a steady cash flow of bonds. Let's say for now, and I'm assuming we do $10 million a year. That's what I forgot to tell you before going to another slide. If we assume that we want to do $10 million a year, it can happen, and I'll show you how. And that's what I want to say. We do a very aggressive redemption program. In 27, we got the capability of calling about $1 million in bonds to pay it off. We paid off. That would bring your debt capacity down to 10. In 28, $2.2 million in redemption program, and it brings your debt capacity down to 10. In 29, the same thing. So basically what we have here is that we got a huge, we've taken our cash, we're not selling that $27 million, we're not selling all that 13, we've taken advantage of that cash flow, go out, redeem, pay all bonds, but we only sell this portion here. Does that make sense? So what's happening here is that in light of that, as a result, that $10 million would give you that little gray spot right here. I call it, that's your recurring debt service. That's going to be a tax rate requirement to service that debt. Does that make sense? So in other words, from a 9 goes up to 10, 8.2 goes to 9.4, and 8.2 goes to 90, if we do those $10 million bonds every year, okay? Now, the redemption part is on top of that. That's the redemption portion, that we're using excess cash flow to pay off the extra bonds. And I consider the items in that baby blue as one-time money. You don't have to do it, remember that, okay? Let me tell you what I mean by that. Let's say by 2019, hey, Gil, let's cool off on the bonds. Well, what happens, your debt service drops to 8.4, the real debt service at that time. No more refunding, no more bonds, then your debt service for the city in 29 will be 8.4. Actually less if I do some interest savings. I didn't include the interest savings in there. It would be quite a bit. It will drop quite a bit. But my point is you will have the flexibility to do your bonds, to pay off some bonds, and when you want to cut off the water, you drops it down to back to normal where it should be. So you have full control of your future and your debt service. It's not, the other option would be you do this. You sell that, you're locked in. There's no going back unless you pay them off. So if you do this without the redemption, you're going to be locked in with $11 million debt service, no matter what, and you have to establish a tax rate to service that debt, okay? Versus over here, you create a cash flow situation for your debt service that will meet, a cash flow situation for your CIP that will meet your needs over the next 5 years, while at the same time you're paying off bonds, and somehow you want to cut it off, you still have the capability to drop it down back to normal 8.4 if you didn't have any more redemption to do. Does that make sense? On this one here, it'll continue. You're done until your next available capacity, which is in 30-something, 31, 32. Okay? That's important. I'll make sure you understand that, because what I'm trying to tell you is that you still have the flexibility. Even though you still have $50 million, I understand that, but that's no surprise. I hope it's not, because we've been talking around the 40s. I understand that we're at 10, but that should be no surprise, because in the coming couple of years, you're going to have the capacity again, but at that time, you can still be more flexible. The only reason this one was higher, we're doing now, you got a public safety building. That needed to be done, correct? It's not like a straight. Moving forward, hopefully we don't have another public safety in the next 5 years, but you have more flexibility as you need.
It's just going to be called something different.
And plan it out. Maybe some other buildings, but not public safety. I want to make sure you understand that, Council, because you have a lot of flexibility. Because even though you sit to 50 right now, a few years from now, you still got the flexibility coming forward with the next window. So you're not in bad shape. And I do foresee, hopefully, the interest rates drop. And I mentioned it, Mark, a while back, the bonds that we sold, we still can refinance those and still have a little more savings.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask that, so on your recommendation on the 10 million, are there your recommendation on the 10 million, 27, 28, 29, and that, are there assumptions built into that about the interest rates?
Yep.
That you assume they're going to continue dropping?
No.
No.
That's to give you the highlight that my assumptions are very conservative. In other words, I'm using, let me see if I can put it in dollar cents. I'm using $80,000 for every $1 million bond.
Okay.
That's built in. Reality, 76 to $1 million. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Those numbers has a higher annual debt service based on a higher interest. But in reality, what I said a while ago is that if my prediction is right, those rates back there will be close around 3.9, 3.8, 3.7. Right now, it's above 4 something.
Right.
Let me take it a little further. I still think the rate's going to drop in '24, and that's because if you're a big follower of money supply, not the consumer price and all that, but I'm actually money that's flowing out to the public, M1, M2, and all that stuff, that has been drying. There's going to be a minor recession, just my prediction. It's free. Don't take it for granted, but that's my advice. And I have built in a slight one in the budget because something has to give. As a result of that, I still see those rates coming down. Now, with that said, let me qualify one point. I don't think we're going to get back to the 2% free interest stuff. Let me just qualify that now. I think we'd be above that and below between 2 and 4. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, thank you.
We're good here? All right, revenue side, I will move on a little quicker because I think you're very familiar, but I will talk about it real quick. All right, pretty straightforward. We haven't had to sell any bonds lately, and there's nothing wrong with that. But our next 4 years, we're going to have debt service about $5 million is continue to drop. 3-4 years ago, that was $9 million. Debt outstanding principal looks great. And I'm not surprised somehow not this and next year, you might get another upgrade in credit rating on the utility side. Now, let me give you back some history. You already know it, but just for the public itself, our utility rates generates 2 sections of cash flows. We have it's structured where it creates cash flow for the operation itself, a regular operation, and also creates cash flow for the debt service, which is built in my base rates, okay? As you well know, the debt service right now, I got a requirement amount, and then we've been using a little excess on CIP, and that allows us to have very, very aggressive CIP, as you well know. Just to giggles, annual cat, right now, this is what's built in the rates, 9.5. I'm required to service this debt on a given year, and this is my cash flow that I have available to give towards the CIP, or if council wish down the road, do some debt, then I need to back that cash flow off. A lot of flexibility, a lot of health there, a lot of financial health. You don't have a lot of C's that way. All right. That line represents your current debt service, period.
Mr. Renier, may I ask a question? I'm sorry, on the
Go
other
back.
one.
Go back.
Yes, sir. That 9.25, the major assumption to take away from that is that there's no adjustment to utility rates. Is that right?
Okay. When we say utility rates, I need to be more specific. What I mean by that, you got utility rate increase on the regular operation rates versus debt side. Utility rates go up on the debt side whenever we issue debt in the past. We have not issued any debt. So what I'm saying is those rates that were passed years ago are still embedded in the utilities, which generates $9 million.
But we could see, after we do this utility rate study that we have planned, right, I'm talking on the consumer end, the operation side may increase. But there's no need in this forecast to take care of any additional debt cash flow in the new utility rate.
You want to finish my schedule, my
Oh.
presentation? I know you're educated on this, Jeff. Yes, sir, you're absolutely right.
Okay.
But correct. And what I'm about to say is that this is your debt, and if you want to do your debt, this is your debt capacity right now if you take a snapshot. In 25, you got about $52 million. And if you don't use it, of course, you know this debt keeps moving across and just piles up on the other debt. Now, what I'm saying that I think you were talking about is that, yes, we do have a stormwater study that's going on now. We have huge flexibility in how we want to handle that. Let's say, I'm just throwing a number out there, folks. You want to go up $1.50. Well, maybe on residential, you don't do $1.50. We just scrape some over here, we shipped it over there, maybe it's just 50 cents or a quarter. I don't know. Well, we play that out down the road. But if we go forward with this new enterprise fund, we have to have some initial reserve established. And I'm thinking, hey, I got this excess money, I need to pull some money over here to create a reserve to make it work until it starts building up higher. Also, I have to buy equipment. I got to finance that ahead of time, because my cash flow, if I set up utilities on the drainage, let's say October 1, I want to have cash flow enough to acquire what I need. So I might have to just scrape some money over here temporary to get this thing going. That kind of hit spot in a way? Okay. Now, I have took a wag right now, as of right now, December, what I'm looking at from a cash flow perspective that we can use for a CIP program. Keep in mind, come March, we plan to have a second follow-up. It might change a tad, but this is where I'm starting off with. You're looking about, well, over the next 5 years, about $136 million. Of that, I have an assumption of bonds doing 29% bonds, which there it is, $37 million over the next 5 years. General fund, 20, utilities, 29. Here's your, all that is mainly because of the utility cash flow. I'm glad you brought that up, Mayor. It's because it's possible, maybe in 26, this might change because we want to shift things around. So I left it the way it is right now, but I know when I start adding project, I gotta keep that in mind. I don't want to put too much burden on that right now. Sales tax. As you can see, we level out from 27 to 29, 5. And I think a while back, I don't know if y'all remember, his city manager made a presentation, which got the data from us, that we got to start leveling down off. So that's reflective of that. Keep in mind also that we do have an assumption that the sales tax will allocate in their budget process $1 million for help for the public safety building deal. So that's built in, but not here, but in sales tax. Then you got CDBG MIP. Cross your fingers, hope everything goes right. I'm assuming we go through the process in 24, all the questions, everything else, and then we can start moving forward in 25. The other funds is just some interest income I put in there from building services, public safety building, CO bonds, stuff like that. But that's what we're looking at right now. And it's a rough, but I feel good about it so far.
And Gilbert, I just want to add, and I in essence, remind you that the current CIP planning window that we're operating under runs through fiscal year 26. So what you're seeing there for fiscal years 25 and 26, for the most part, all of that is already planned for, encumbered for, et cetera. And so as we start having conversations on potential new capital projects, it's really for fiscal years 27 through 29 that we're trying to, get some consensus eventually on what projects to plug in, right? And that's why we had the presentation, for example, from Chief Fox before he retired, because obviously, we have to have a conversation about the cost of relocating Station 5, for example. And today, you'll hear about some major thoroughfares, per your direction, that, we have to start thinking about, well, how do we plug those in? Residential street program, right? We have to start thinking about some of that. So it will be a busy 3 to 4 months as we work towards trying to develop a fiscal year 25 edition of the CIP because of the fact that we have, projects that their total cost, is this much, but the funding is much less, right? And so having that prioritization conversation is going to be a challenge over the next few months, but that's why we want to start having it as robust as possible from the get-go.
Okay. Any questions, council? Y'all look at her like, what? I appreciate it. I'm serious. I enjoy talking to you and this stuff. It's always great. Anyway, you want to announce me? I'll stop and let you.
Yeah, we'll just move on to the next item, if that's okay, Mayor?
Yes.
Okay, so next up is an update on our CIP, which does include specific updates on the 2 major thoroughfares that council asked us to study last year, which is Guy Grant and North Street. And we do have our engineer consultants that were involved with those projects here to help discuss those. But to kick it off, I'm going to turn it over to David. As you know, he's our new city engineer, and this is his first go at it. No pressure, David. We're here to support you, man. You got this.
Thank you.
You're supposed to know by memory already.
Good afternoon. I'm here to provide you with a status of current CIP projects. As you can see, I've got it set up where projects that were began under the 2023 CIP year. I've got color-coded to indicate which projects are under construction, which ones are completed. And as far as going back to the ones that are completed, just at the beginning of this month, the residential street maintenance project for 2023 had been completed. The other projects, Crestwood reconstruction, Phase 3 from Main to Navarro Streets under construction. Underground utilities are about 90% complete. Right now, we are waiting on a permit from Union Pacific Railroad so we can make a bore under the railroad to connect a water line from one side to the other. As far as the street construction, Brandon Paving has began demolition. They pulled up some curb and gutter on the south side of the road, and I think they actually started doing some excavation on that also. Dairy Road construction, they're actually laying hot mix asphalt today. And we are anticipating that for the end of the month that this street will be completed. Other than, there might be a few minor cleanup items, but as far as the main construction, as far as the asphalt improvements, that will be completed. Tanglewood Phase 1, that is utility construction at this time. That is underway. We've done some sewer line rehab, and that has been completed. Now it is water line construction, and overall the utilities are approximately 50% complete. Once that is completed, as we near completion of the utility projects, we will go out for bids for the street reconstruction so that the street contractor can move in shortly after the utilities are completed. College Park utilities, I better put my glasses on. The utilities are approximately 63% complete. That has the same situation as those utilities get closer to completion. We will go out for bids for the street reconstruction and to begin that work shortly after the utilities are completed. CIP 2024 projects. Right now, as far as the citywide street lighting projects, there's a professional services agreement that's been executed with Tanco Lighting to go through and determine areas of deficient street lightings so that we can then coordinate with AEP and also Victoria Electric Co-op for the addition of extra lights to provide adequate coverage. Public safety building. As we was discussed at the council meetings past Tuesday, the guaranteed maximum price should be established by mid-January. Once that is done, then actually start breaking ground next spring, I would think. So that would be great. High service pump at the surface water treatment plant. We will be bidding this project out first part of next year. And construction, at this point in time, I can't tell you how long a lead time it is to be on delivery on that pump of that capacity, but it will be in place, I would think, by the end of next 24 calendar year. All right, well, got the Crestwood reconstruction, that's actually just a repeat from the 2023 CIP. Vine Street reconstruction, we are hoping to advertise this early 2024 in January. We want to partner this up with some improvements in the Bridle Ridge subdivision of Vista del Sol. Our thinking is that with the larger scale and scope of the project, we may be able to get better bid prices. Mill and Overlay Project, this for Country Club, Mockingbird, Ben Jordan, Pleasant Green, Odom, Larkspur, and Delmar. Again, this will also be let in early 2024. Bridle Ridge Phase 3, Vista del Sol reconstruction, I mentioned that earlier, to be combined with the, yes ma'am, sorry.
Could you back up to Vine Street reconstruction?
sorry.
For just a second, and you
Yes,
probably
ma'am.
said this, but I missed it. What section of Vine Street is that?
This will be going from Mockingbird down to Red River.
Thank you.
Going back to Bridle Ridge Phase 3 and 4, Vista del Sol reconstruction. Again, this will be partnered up with the Vine Street reconstruction as far as the scope of the work. Tanglewood Phase 1 reconstruction, that would be the actual street improvements. We're hoping to let that project February of next year, approximately 4 months or so before we anticipate the utilities to be completed. By that time, the contractor should be ready to mobilize, move in, and begin the work. Bon Air utility reconstruction, those construction contracts have been executed. A pre-construction conference has been held. The contractor has moved in on site and is beginning to do the work. Bon Air Street reconstruction. That is still under design. That design is approximately 90% complete. We anticipate letting this project in the third quarter of 2024. College Park Street reconstruction. That one's probably about 80% complete. We are thinking that that one will be let in mid 2024. The next three, Wagner Way Extension, Magruder Drive reconstruction, and Lingo Lane reconstruction. All three of those projects are tied together. At this time, I think we're just unsure exactly how we're going to proceed. So, if you can add.
Well, I would just add that, council's obviously aware of, our ongoing conversations with Texas Concrete for the extension of Wagner Way. And it makes sense to finalize, whether that's going to happen or not, because of the fact that Wagner leads into Lingo and leads into Magruder, and it just makes sense to look at that as one whole stretch. And so that's why those are, I don't want to say on hold, but definitely figuring out what's going to happen with Wagner Way will help determine the timeline and how we proceed with Magruder and Lingo. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
2024 residential street program. This is a seal coat program for streets in Putney Moore subdivision, Emerald Hills and Acre subdivision. We anticipate letting those out for bids in early 2024 and a contractor to begin construction in late summer, after the worst of the summer heat has passed. Vine Street waterline replacement. This project is under design, has been surveyed. The topo was done, is under design. We should let the project in June or so of next year, with construction to begin in August. Northeast Water Street. That is going to be for a design, a professional services contract. We are preparing the scope to request proposals from consultants. Same for the Dairy Road water line abandonment. Country Club sanitary sewer replacement. That has been, contract's been executed. Contractors moved on site and actually began excavating this week to replace the sewer line going from Magruder up to the lift station on Country Club Drive. Emerald Hills subdivision sanitary sewer. At this point in time, we are trying to determine the best method to rehabilitate this sewer line. We were trying to get a camera crew in there to televise these lines. It is along, probably the Spring Creek, and backyard easements, and city crews just don't have the capability, don't have the equipment, I should maybe say, to perform that work. So right now, there's a contract with the National Works for sewer line cleaning and TVing currently underway in town. And we were just going to add that additional length of line to their scope so that we can find out exactly what the situation is with the line, the condition of it, so we can make our best determination for best method of reconstruction rehabilitation. Anthony Road sanitary sewer line replacement. Again, we'll be looking for proposals from consultants. That's the last of the CIP projects that we're discussing. We have some other miscellaneous projects that weren't included on the CIP program, but are still underway. CDBG DR project for pump stations and drainage gates. That is under construction. There have been some delays in acquisition of electronic transfer switches, automatic transfer switches for the generators that are to be installed there. I understand that those have been delivered now, and that I should have checked this morning before it came, but the generators, I understand, are at the warehouse, or had been. I don't know if they've been delivered and set on site. Phase 2 of the citywide LED street lighting, that was in the northern area of Victoria, that is covered by AEP. That has been completed. Those lights have been swapped out from the the sodium vapor to the LEDs. DeLeon Plaza, that is underway. As of right now, and don't expect any different, this project is on schedule to be completed by the first part of April in time for the bicentennial celebration. So,
I was there today, and it looks great.
pardon?
Said I was there today, and it looked great.
Good. Riverside Dog Park. That is essentially complete on construction. There's a floodplain development permit that has to be issued. That will be done. And that project should be having this month have a soft start, is what I understand, with a ribbon cutting in January. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Duck Pond project, that is proceeding along well. The gazebo has been constructed. Right now, we're underway in constructing the waterfall portion of that gazebo. Contractor is getting set to lower the water level of the pond so that they can make the excavations for the suction intake piping and also to set the submersible pumps in the pond. Ben Wilson Corridor project, that one is almost completed. Last I'd heard that they're working on the tower, and it is anticipated that all the construction should be complete in January of 2024. We're looking forward to having that open and just. Oh, the LED display on that tower hasn't, okay. All right. Ken has corrected me. The construction project should be complete, everything except the LED display that's part of the clock tower and the transit stop. But those are, so it'll be substantially complete, correct?
I have a question on
Yes.
that project. Before they started breaking up the street, they had 2 lights for crossing for the students. Right now, there's only 1. Are they going to put the other one back up? There's still going to be 2?
I would think so.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that there was going to be any reduction.
It should be 2.
Okay.
Maybe one's not
Only
working,
one-
I'm not sure, but
Yeah, only 1 is working right now, so I was just wondering if they were going to put that second. They'll have both of them? Okay.
I have a question on, and I don't know if it's Wagner Way, Magruder Drive, or Lingo Lane. But, so the road, right after, if you're on Magruder, right after you go over the railroad tracks, and you're on a road, there's some houses on one side, and Texas Concrete is on the other. That road takes a beating because of the equipment that is on that road. So in the design phase, I don't really know what heavy haul is, but I gather we might need something like that. Would we be designing that appropriately, or would we design that just like the residential street that it had been?
No, ma'am, we would design it appropriately based upon the anticipated load on that street.
and Wagner Way's already designed.
Okay.
So Wagner Way,
Is that what that one is? I don't
yes,
know that.
Wagner Way is the one that's in between the residences and Texas Concrete. That's the one that would punch through to go to Main Street.
Right.
That's already designed. Civil Corps has already designed that, and they've designed it concrete, from my understanding.
To handle heavy loads.
Yeah, and as well as other options that we can, other reasons that we can discuss in executive session, but yes, it's been designed to be concrete.
Thank you. I like being proactive and just wanted to make sure we were
Yeah.
in that one.
Yes, ma'am.
I had a question. Actually, I was thinking about it, and this magically popped up, which was kind of nice.
That's because we can read your mind.
Now I'm going to start thinking of lottery numbers. But I saw that the mill and overlay for Pleasant Green, a portion of it was for 24, but there's some significant issues with Pleasant Green on some other parts towards getting on the loop. And then all of a sudden, this map came up in front of me, and I wanted to speak about that and what are our plans in regards to that road, which is in really, really poor shape. And I've had some constituents reach out to me. And you guys are prepared.
Well, I guess we'll start with the video since it's playing.
Yes, this is a flyover of that section of Pleasant Green that we're looking to add to the 24 CIP plan. As you can see, all those areas, those potholes along the edge of the road, the depression along the edge of the road, that street has deteriorated significantly.
And you could see the truck had to drive in the middle
Right.
Yeah.
because the sides are
Was
pretty
that
bad.
planned?
As we get closer to, see, is that Delmar that we're approaching?
It looks like Delmar.
Well, that's one lane there? Okay, I was just trying to make sure I got the right, okay, that is Delmar. But you can still see that road is significantly, there's basically, it was considered base failures along the edges. I had suspicions of the cause of this, but then after discussions and conversations with various residents, they've confirmed it. When TXDOT rerouted and is reconstructing the off-ramp there between Highway 87 and Highway 185, now to get on Highway 87, you have to exit, go all the way down to 185, do a U-turn and come back, whereas before you exited right over the overpass, came around and hit Highway 87 on the north side of Highway 59. So what the trucks are doing, they're exiting for Juan Lynn Street, the prior exit. They're taking Juan Lynn, taking Pleasant Green, then getting Highway 87. Pleasant Green was not constructed for that load, that type of load. Have-
So who's going to talk through this?
Oh, I will.
Okay.
Okay. The Pleasant Green portion from Callis to Lawrence Street was originally in the CIP plan for 2024. That is the section that's highlighted in blue. The section that's highlighted in green, to the right side of it, that's the part between Juan Lynn and Port Lavaca Highway that is illustrated by this video. That's when we want to go in and reconstruct the street. The portion highlighted in yellow or gold, however you want to call that, between Port Lavaca Highway and Callis Street, that is going to be added in the next CIP window, either 27, 28, or 29. At this point in time, we don't know which year we'll have that in, but we will have that for you when we update in March.
So, yeah, so you kind of skipped over a big important factor here. So, there's two projects that are currently in fiscal year '24. They're two mill and overlay projects. And you'll have to verbalize which two mill and overlay projects those are, because those aren't listed here.
And Delmar, Odom and Delmar.
Okay, so sections of Odom and Delmar were scheduled in fiscal year '24 for mill and overlays. Staff's opinion is that those mill and overlays can be delayed a year, and in essence, free up cash in fiscal year '24 by moving those to fiscal year '25 and add in this section of Pleasant Green, which is ironically in green on the map.
Let me add on also, I know you probably was gonna say, but I'm gonna catch. This is strictly, we're still within the window we talked to you about a year ago, 24, 25, 26. We're not pushing them out, nothing like that. We're just moving around within that window. So they're gonna be done, just that this one's just a little worse shape, needs to be done first. That's all. Make sure it's still in that window.
What? The miles.
It's about 3/10 of a mile additional road improvements for that section.
So in essence, we're proposing and we're in essence wanting to get some direction, agreement from council that you're okay with what we're proposing, which is delaying those two mill and overlays to fiscal year '25, which again, as Gilbert pointed out, is still within that, fiscal year '22 to '26, planning window that we're trying to get to 112 miles for. And add this one because of the necessity of the condition, as you see in the video.
In that handout, you say that you've got total cost of $1.3 million in there, so that's still going to be, we can comfortably pay for that with that money?
Yes, by delaying those two other projects,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And we would, because there was already a mill and overlay for the Callis to Laurent piece, we would bid those out together.
Okay,
And that was one of the reasons why we wanted to try and talk to you about this today or just soon, because this is fiscal year '24 project, right? And so, so if you're okay with us doing this, then we would proceed with more than likely contracting out to an engineering company to design the whole thing, or maybe not, I'm not sure.
No, we can do this in-house.
Okay, so we'll do that in-house, so we can bid the project, within this fiscal year and just get it going. I know that we probably might get questions, about, well, why not just do, the yellow part, while you're at it? But that would increase the cost, significantly. And unless, you decided on canceling a project or something else, that would be very difficult to achieve. But that piece is probably the one that's in best shape from all three segments. And so that one's probably okay to simply just do, some other year.
Is the part in green the part that takes most of this truck traffic y'all referred to?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
and that's the part that the video showed.
Yeah,
Right.
okay. But the truck traffic typically isn't on the yellow. It's mostly
No,
on the
sir.
green part.
Once it reaches
Okay.
Highway 87, it'll turn either going
turn on
into
the highway.
town or going back toward Port Lavaca.
Okay. Can we send text out the bill?
We can, we can.
Just
I'm
make,
not sure they'll pay it, but we can send it to them.
doesn't hurt to ask, right?
Yeah, that's right. Okay, well, I'm not hearing any opposition to that, and so,
Yeah, I'm in favor of it.
okay, so we'll proceed in that, in that way. Does anybody have any questions on any ongoing fiscal year 23 or 24 projects? Obviously, a lot of projects in design for fiscal year 24, since we're still, in the first quarter of fiscal year 24. We're good?
Good.
Okay.
Good.
If there aren't, thank you, David. That was pretty good for being here like a month and a half.
Thank you.
I know it's been a lot to absorb. He even told us himself, man, there's way more going on that the city's involved with than he even realized. And ain't that the truth, right? That's what a lot of people think. But anyway, thank you. We will continue to talk about the two thoroughfare projects. I'll let you introduce, because I don't know who's going first.
All right. Randy Yannock with Civil Corps is going to give us a presentation on North Street improvements.
Keep in mind, as you hear about these projects and others, that what we're recommending for fiscal years 27 through 29 is 10 million in COs and 5 million from VSTDC. All right, you good?
Need to hit something to get it pulled up?
You have to say
North
pretty
Street.
please or
North
something.
Street, yes. All right, there you go. All right, good afternoon, Mayor and Council.
Can you
Appreciate-
speak better into the mic?
Sure,
You can lift it up. Or hold it, whatever.
I'll hold it. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Randy Yannock. Appreciate being here to speak with you about the North Street project. Miguel Luna is here. He's seated over there. He's with me also. He did a lot of lay work on getting this put together. Just wanted to give a brief overview. We are looking at the North Street, beginning at 5 Points and going all the way to Ben Wilson. It's a little over 2 miles, about 2.3 miles in length. When we started looking at this, we kind of tried to break it down into smaller pieces. So we kind of used the major roads, basically from Moody to Navarro as phase 1, Navarro to Laurent as phase 2, Laurent to Ben Jordan as phase 3, and phase 4 being Ben Jordan to Ben Wilson. We also then kind of further broke those down in at least phases 1, 2, and 3 into A and B to kind of get the cost down to a smaller amount to tackle at one point. Obviously, we can do the whole phase at one time or break it out into these portions. We set this up as phase 1, basically starting at 5 Points and proceeding phase 1, 2, and 3, hitting towards Ben Wilson.
And also keep in mind that this is just conversation, right? So if you'd like to see something different,
Yes.
that's the kind of direction that we are looking for. So for example, if you decided we need to do the section in front of the school first, right? Obviously that we could work.
Yes, that's
look at it
I was going to say
different,
that was next.
So just keep that in mind, that what we're showing today isn't necessarily us saying this is the way it has to be, but it's the beginning of a conversation on these two projects.
So all this is open for discussion?
Yeah.
Like the price can be lower?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
All about that.
So we'll just talk
We'll
about,
take it from the engineer fees.
so we'll just talk about it in this order because it makes more sense. But I know with Crestwood, we ended up doing the worst section first. And that's kind of what you
Right.
just-
Right, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Driving it, kind of phase 3 is probably the worst part, driving it. But, it also kind of goes in smallest dollar amount to largest dollar amount too, the way it is. But certainly, yeah, phase 3 could be tackled first,
And these are all assumed to be all total rebuilds? We can't?
He'll talk, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yes.
He's gonna break down each phase.
Yeah, well, I'll go through each phase, but yes, basically, this is, in our estimating, we were looking at complete reconstruction. The part of the project from Moody to just past Patty Welder, Bronson Road, that's it's asphalt on top, but there's a concrete pavement that was I think built in the 1930s maybe, and then widened in the 60s, and then overlaid with hot mix back in the 90s. But we are proposing to remove that and come back with a full reconstructed street. These numbers reflect a asphalt street. Obviously, you know, wanted to do concrete, those numbers would go up. But this is representing an asphalt street section. So.
And this is just street reconstruction?
No.
No.
So
Yeah, he'll go
it's
through it.
utilities, some drainage improvements and so forth. So looking at the first phase, I call it Phase 1A, which is from 5 Points to the railroad track. You can kind of see here, we tried to incorporate some of the things in the master, or the downtown master plan, some bulb outs, and right now this currently has on-street parking on both sides for the most part. We're coming back with 6-foot sidewalks on both sides, pedestrian crosswalks. Some of the on-street parking is shown to go away because of limited right-of-way. The right-of-way through here and actually all the way to Ben Jordan is basically 55-6. So we don't have a lot of room. We have several buildings here, the Firestone, let's see, right there, 700 Main right here. They're right next to the sidewalk as it is right now. So we're kind of limited. So in some areas, we're reducing on-street parking and to have a 6-foot sidewalk. Let's see. We also, in this portion at 700 Main, as at the city's staff's request, we are realigning the driveway entrance into the backside of 700 Main to line up with Liberty and putting a crosswalk there. At the railroad, while we're not proposing to go through the process of getting a quiet zone designation, we are showing to put in a 4-foot median on both sides, so that could be done in the future. And then we are proposing to have a sidewalk crossing on the south side. As you can see here, that has to cross perpendicular behind the crossing arm, so that's why it juts out like that and crosses. We don't have the crossing shown on this side just because we don't have room because of I think it's going electric right there. Water and sanitary sewer are already replaced with the downtown utility projects.
Hold the mic up.
With the downtown utility projects. We did look at increasing the storm sewer capacity throughout the project area up to a 5-year storm event, which in this area we are increasing up to like a 54-inch pipe for the first four blocks or so from a 30-inch. So again, this is complete road reconstruction, and our estimate here is about $4.9 million, and that's including water, sewer, storm sewer improvements, street, engineering. Also, we have some estimates in there for private utility relocations because we again have limited right-of-way, and all the power poles are right behind the curb. So we're going to need to get those moved out behind the sidewalk in order to put in our new 6-foot sidewalk and have an unobstructed walking path. Moving on to Phase 1B, which goes from the railroad track to Navarro. In this area here, we have more of the typical on-street parking that you have now. And we are adding a 6-foot sidewalk on both sides. And water and sewer, again, through this section are already replaced. And we're just looking at some minor storm sewer improvements through here to get us up to a 5-year design event.
Where's the raised median and why?
That's at the railroad here.
Yeah,
It's just
So you don't go around the barriers? Why?
Yes.
He said it was that if we ever wanted to make a quiet zone, that it would be prepared for.
We don't have to do it, but
Yes.
that's the way that it conceptually put together, just to put that.
Okay.
Right. Phase 2A goes from Navarro to the next railroad track. Again, we're continuing a 6-foot sidewalk on both sides. And we are also proposing to improve the intersection here at North and Depot and Pecan with a cul-de-sac on Pecan Street. So, because we got those two come in right here together. So to improve that intersection, we are proposing to put a cul-de-sac there. We do have some water line to replace here that's not currently PVC from east to the railroad track. And the sewer line has already been replaced here. This,
Randy, I just want to add, we should have mentioned this earlier, but everything that you see in red is
Yeah.
is property that we would have to acquire. In order to, you'll see that it's mostly in all the corners, to ensure proper ADA accessibility at all the corners.
Yes, basically, like Jesus was saying, the red is a 20-foot by 20-foot corner clip. And then because of the limited right-of-way, we do show mostly 5-foot sidewalk and utility easements, and that will give us room to move the power poles back behind the sidewalk.
I have a
So-
question.
Yes,
You're talking about closing out Pecan Street, right there before you get to North? Is that what the cul-de-sac means?
yes.
Yes. So somebody would just have to take a left.
On Cameron?
Yeah.
Oh, that's where I was born and raised at. I don't know about that.
Okay, moving on to the next phase, 2B, takes us to Laurent. Basically continuing the same section with the on-street parking. We are replacing all the water line through this section and either replacing or rehabbing the 10-inch sanitary sewer line. And again, this is still the area where it's concrete pavement underneath the asphalt, and we are recommending still complete reconstruction here. And y'all drive this, so you know how bad the joints are, and it's that if we just do a mill and overlay, within a few years, all those they're going to reflect back up those joints, and so certainly it's going to cost more, but it's our recommendation to do a full reconstruction on that. All right, so now we get to Laurent, to Cross Street, and this is next to Patty Welder. Continuing our sidewalks, we are trying to meet with the school district for this area, and then down by the old Stroman campus, just to coordinate and discuss, if they got any kind of concerns or things that we can do with this project to help improve their traffic flow. We would also like to potentially talk to them about, possibly putting in a right turn lane here onto Laurent. So we'll be in discussions with them on that. We have a little bit more significant water line replacement here with a 16-inch, and pretty much from here on out, we're having to replace the water and sewer through the rest of the way to Ben Wilson.
And as you look at these costs, they're not necessarily broken down, differentiating, utilities versus street and sidewalk work. That's certainly something that we could do once we kind of figure out which phase is priority, and things like that. So when you look at these cost estimates, don't think that this cost estimate is strictly either on VSTDC or on the CO side. There's obviously some opportunity for the revenue bonds on the utility side to help cover some of this expense, but every section is different.
Right.
As Randy mentioned, from here all the way to the rest of Ben Wilson, it does necessitate, major replacement of water and sewer versus the first section, not so much. And so that's why it's not as simple as just, dividing the project by half, or the cost. Every phase would be different.
Right. And when we generate our report to submit to the city, we'll have all our our cost breakdowns showing what's paving, what's drainage, what's water sewer. That'll all be broken out in our report.
Did you say that from there all the way to Ben Wilson, it's gonna be like 2 lanes?
Is
'Cause
what?
I see a double line for 2 lanes going this way and north.
Yes, this is.
Yeah, that's how it is now.
Okay,
Following what it is right now, yes.
okay.
Yes, ma'am.
But it doesn't have to be that way, you know, if council wants to see something different.
Okay.
It's certainly wide enough to, for example, only do a middle turn lane, 1 lane in each direction, and then have shoulders,
Right,
as an example.
right.
But then, instead of the sidewalks,
No,
No, no,
would they be
we still have
narrow?
Well,
sidewalks.
still have sidewalks. Yeah,
Would they still be able to be 6 feet?
I think these are 5, or are they 6?
no, there's 6 through here
Okay.
also, yes.
So I mean, or would they just be narrower lanes if you,
No, you would
Well-
just have shoulders.
Yeah, the shoulders would be,
Oh.
you know,
They
whatever
wouldn't,
we
they
have
wouldn't be
left.
parking shoulders.
Right, it wouldn't be wide enough for that, for
Do we
parking, no.
have turning lanes right now?
Do we have what?
Turning lanes there on that particular part of?
No,
No.
We don't?
no.
No.
Okay. Okay.
So yes, this gets us to Ben Jordan, and it's pretty much a continuation of 3A, similar 16-inch water line, 8-inch sewer, sidewalks on both sides. This is, we're at a cost of $7 million on this part. So Phase 4, we didn't divide this up. We kept it all as one, from Ben Jordan to Ben Wilson, mainly because we're proposing a more modification of the existing street section here. Currently, right now, there's 2 lanes in both directions with parking on either side, on both sides. So what we're proposing here is to add a center turn lane, and eliminate the parking on the, so I'd call the north side, and we would include parking on the south side once we get past the softball field. So as we approach and through the community center up to Ben Wilson, you see here, we basically have a 14-foot turn lane, 2 12-foot lanes on either side, and then an 8-foot parking area on the community center side. And then we're proposing a 10-foot shared use path, basically from the softball field to Ben Wilson in front of the community center. Just, you know, we get a lot of pedestrian traffic over there during the rodeo and certain events and so forth. So we also are going to talk to, because we know on the Showman side where the football or the field is there, a lot of people park and walk that. So we would need to get some additional right-of-way from the school to do that. But that is something we're going to talk to them about, if we can kind of put in a 8-foot lane for at least along the track, you know, in front of the track there, so
That
people
would be
can
for parking?
park there. We also have in the cost estimate here to put a future traffic signal at Ben Wilson. And then also we are showing to extend the 6-foot sidewalk on the north side of North Street from Ben Wilson to, I think it's Lova, where there's sidewalk there currently. So it'll kind of provide connectivity to all that. Again, replacing our water and sewer line through here, and are doing some storm sewer improvements in this area. So this is the biggest cost item, $12.5 million. And we would also be looking at getting about 10 foot of right-of-way along the community center side there for these improvements to fit the turn lane and the 10-foot shared use path and parking, so.
So,
That's a,
sorry, go ahead.
okay, that's a four-way stop right there where we've had some major accidents. So I think that's a very good idea that we have a traffic signal right there. I mean, it was worse when the schools was there, but it's a lot of traffic that goes through there.
So the utility work that's included on this, I'm assuming there was an assumption, that's two assumptions, probably a really bad
They
place,
cancel
but-
each other out.
Yeah, right. That the community center was gonna continue to be used in the way it currently is. I know we're looking at what we could do there. Is there gonna be different options? Would that potentially necessitate I guess, a refurbishment or a redo of the design for the utilities? Or do we think that that utility would handle some expanded use of the community center?
That's a great question. I'm pretty sure the utilities there would be fine, because we wouldn't be drastically adding anything that would be, that dense, or of any huge size to warrant anything larger than what is there now. But we can certainly, double check it. And obviously, as we go through the master planning process for the community center, obviously we'll show, some of these plans as well. Because we have always thought that it would make sense whenever we do get around to doing this phase, to also incorporate redoing the parking lot of the community center, since you'd already have, the equipment out there, mobilized, to the area. So obviously, whatever new plan for the parking lot and that type of infrastructure that's at the community center, would make sense to figure out as part of this too.
Okay. And of these phases, is there one in particular that we anticipate the right-of-way acquisition is gonna be more challenging than maybe the others? Because that could have an impact on timing.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Because there isn't necessarily one phase, other than the one phase that does include cul-de-sac and the street, that has the largest chunk of right-of-way. But there really isn't anything that sticks out, at least right now.
Okay. It looked like mostly corners.
Yeah, I will say
it's mostly-
that, one thing that I plan to verbalize later, but I'll verbalize it now since the topic came up, is that, and you've heard me talk about it, with you before, around how the city used to, be a little bit more staffed up in this area, hence, the era when, we widened other streets and, took over some property, acquired some property. And so for this project, and then when you hear about Guy Grant, that'll necessitate right-of-way acquisition, this time we're probably gonna try and take a stab at outsourcing, a specialized firm that could help us through the right-of-way acquisition piece and kind of try that out. And maybe once we get to that step, maybe they'll find something that we have no idea about that might overcomplicate, one of the pieces. But as of now, we can't see anything that overcomplicates one section over the other.
Okay, great, thank you.
For sake of time, Randy, let's try and.
Yeah, there's the last slide right here. So, and we kind of already talked about it, but do our limited right-of-way again, we'll be looking at getting corner clips at most of the intersections, and 5 or 10 foot wide sidewalk utility easements to be able to shift our power poles and fit our sidewalk. With a project like this, we definitely want to start our acquisition at an early stage. Probably when we're at about 30% design is when we'll have a real good idea on what that right-of-way needs to be. And then we'll need to get, for private utility relocations, we want those to happen before construction. We'll have to, move our power poles. We've got gas lines all through here that could be in conflict. So we want to try to get that work done prior to construction. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done before we get to actual construction on this. So
I'm sure that the question
it.
will.
I would go back. What's your next slide after this?
That's it,
Okay. Can you go back to the very first slide that shows all the 4 phases, just to kind of
yes.
have all 4 popped up there again? Again, this is the beginning of a conversation around this project. And so I ask that you think about things like, which section would you want to try and tackle first? I get that sometimes, money can help drive that conversation, but all of these are expensive in their own way. And so I ask that you focus on maybe other factors in determining which phase you'd like to see first. And then we can try and then plan, how we intend on phasing that out, right? One of the things that we can do and why it's important for us to figure this out this spring is because there probably will be an opportunity in fiscal year '26, for example, to start investing in design work for different projects, start investing in right-of-way acquisition, even though we know that it's not until fiscal year '27 that we have the capacity to actually start construction. Knowing what we want to do in '27 and '28, we can start plugging in some things in the current planning window to help be better prepared for that. And that's why it's important to figure out, the long-term goal for that. But anyway, any other questions for staff or Randy on this?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, the different colored sections, is that the way that we would bid them out? Is that what you're saying?
That's up to y'all. That's
Okay.
what I'm
That's up to
asking.
y'all.
Right.
For y'all to think about which phases would be more important.
Okay.
you.
I know when we did Crestwood, didn't we say that we wanted to start on one end and go to the other, basically because of the construction traffic that would go over the street, and we did a middle section? So wouldn't this play in this scenario too?
I'm not sure if that was the only reason for that. I doubt it because you can access these streets from different areas. So I don't foresee that being an issue here because we have these major thoroughfares that serve as the bookends for these projects.
Okay,
That those major intersections would be the access points, of heavy equipment to go to either one or the other. That would be my non-engineer, answer to that. I also know that sometimes there's the thought that if you're gonna replace all the utilities, you wanna just go smoothly from one end to the next. But not all the utilities in this project need to be replaced anyway.
Right.
So it really, doesn't really matter, I would think.
Well, I was going to say, forgive me for stating the obvious, but first of all, this is beautiful. It's wonderful to imagine it being completed. It's extremely expensive, and my focus on North Street is the parts that are the most impossible to drive, which are in front of Patty Welder and I think between Laurent and Ben Jordan, which is
Right.
the street that's in the worst shape, and the fact that we've got concrete under some old streets, it's making them hang on. And I understand that it would be good to replace them, but my focus would be, because we're still trying to catch up on bad streets, that would be where I would.
Right, which would be phase 3 with what we show
Right.
here,
Yes.
the one in red.
I have two questions. Does this include the cost of easement acquisition?
I threw in
There's
a
a,
certain,
there's a guesstimate.
token amount in there.
Yeah, there's a guesstimate in there, but we won't really know until we actually hire somebody that go through appraisals and do all that work.
And I agree with Jen about the third one, but my question is, in some of them, you were replacing the sewers with 5 years, or a storm system with 5 years. Is there one particular area that floods more than the others?
Through this section, so in the 2021 master drainage plan update, there was kind of, I call it a heat map, rain on grid, and it showed different colors for, worst ponding. Through this stretch, the worst ponding we have is in the yellow color, which is like 1.5 to 2 foot deep. We don't have the colors that are worse than that. Most of that is downtown in the first part of the project, from Moody to like the railroad track, and we are proposing improvements there. Now, the original drainage master plan called for a large box culvert to go there. We are just basically proposing, and as we had discussed with the city, to upsize to a 5-year storm event, because I think that the Master Drainage 2021 also basically says most of this is 2-year or under along this stretch.
And we're trying to marry, what the plan suggests with common sense, right, of real life, right? Because, if we follow a strictly data recommendation, it's going to suggest the box culvert, et cetera. But if you go out there today, you very rarely see it, with any water. And for the most part, that area is developed. So you're not going to see, a major increase in impervious cover in that stretch. And so that's why we kind of compromised and gave the direction to Civil Corps that, upgrade it a little bit, so that it is improved, but not to the extent that it would make it even more cost prohibitive to do anything. Because real life and common sense tells us that there really isn't a big issue there, as some data might suggest. Does that make sense?
Right, yeah. Yeah, and Ken pointed out there's not really house flooding along there, so,
So all 4 phases have the 5-year storage for the water?
yes.
Yes.
I thought it did. It's just that I didn't see it very well. Okay.
And just look and thinking forward, if we're able to construct this at some time, we're gonna have to think creatively about construction timelines. This can't
Right.
go along as Crestwood has gone along, especially with school there. There has to be a better way of doing this reconstructions and get them done in a timely fashion.
That's an excellent point, for sure.
Yeah.
And
that's why we
And
suggest,
that might increase cost when you take that into consideration.
Potentially.
yeah. And that's
So-
why, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you go ahead.
No, I was just going to, just a quick comment. That's why I was talking at the end about trying to get the private utilities relocated prior to construction, because a lot of times you have delays during construction because of those gas lines you encounter, or, AEP is taking a long time to move the poles out of the way and so forth. So if we can get that done beforehand, that'll streamline construction.
Right. And so again, that's why understanding which phase is priority helps us, possibly plug in some low-hanging fruit expenses, during this planning window, whether it be design work, whether it be right-of-way acquisition, just to kind of prep, leading into a big, heavy construction year of '27.
I
So-
think 3 is good. And because you're saying that you're going to talk to the school district, yeah, that's a good phase to start with.
No, I agree. I think, especially if we're redoing sidewalks by the schools and, let's get those done
And I
and
like-
that makes a lot of sense to me.
I like the right turn from north onto Laurent. I think that's a great addition.
Awesome. Well, I guess I'm already hearing that there's a agreement in taking phase 3 and being the first one that we look at. Staff reminded me on Wednesday when we met to go over this, that in the past, when staff has put together plans for reconstruction of North Street, it had always been discussed as a 5-year plan, from my understanding, from what I was told. And so obviously you can see why, right? Because of just all the expense of the project and the length of it. And so my takeaway from here is that we'll focus on trying to break it down better for phase 3, and looking at some of the things that it would take to get there. And so perhaps maybe by the time our workshop in March comes, we'll be better prepared with a more specific recommendation on how we might be able to tackle that phase. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So along the same vein, we want to talk about Guy Grant. And so Matt's going to talk about Guy Grant, Matt with Urban. Please don't spend a lot of time on the expensive option. I will warn you that there's a cost prohibitive option, because it's the option that encloses the ditch. But we don't think there's a lot of work, there's a lot of time needed to be spent on that, because quite frankly, we just can't afford it. So I'd rather focus our time in sharing some other ideas that we have that we think we possibly can afford. But we'll show you the expensive one anyway, because I think it's important you understand why it's that expensive. Go for it.
Thank you, Jesus. Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. This is Guy Grant reconstruction presentation. This goes from Salem to Ben Jordan. As you'll note, there's not a road between Mockingbird and Ben Jordan, but we were asked to look at it. It was on the thoroughfare master plan, so we went with that way. So existing conditions, it's a deteriorated two-lane hot mix roadway. It gets about 4,656 cars a day. There's no sidewalks. There's a large open ditch section through most of it, and then it connects to this large ditch through Shenandoah Park. The existing water line's 8-inch asbestos concrete, and it contains a 30-inch sanitary storm sewer. Of course, you notice there's power poles on both sides of the road, and we found a fiber optic line on the north side. So in starting looking at this thing, we broke it into 3 pieces. So we looked at the project 1, which is in green. That goes from Salem to Mockingbird. That's the existing section. And then we have the piece from Mockingbird to Ben Jordan, which would be the new section that's identified on the master plan. And then we also looked at this walking trail section that goes through Shenandoah Park and connects to the main walking trail on Lone Tree Creek. So real quick, we provided options on the Project 1, or the area we're calling Project 1, which is the existing section. You'll see option 1 is quite expensive. We have option 2, which is some middle ground in there, and then we went to option 3, which is a simple reclaim, no sidewalk. No, let me go back. I didn't, and also we have the Ben Jordan, the new piece of roadway in there, and then the Project 3 was just the walking trail extension. So we'll go through Project 1. This is the expensive option, as Jesus requested. I'll go real fast, but it would replace the box, replace the ditch with the box. It included a 3-lane concrete street, 10-foot sidewalk on the north side. On the south side of the road. Replace the water, replace the sewer, and then this option requires us to do a piece of the storm drain master plan, and that's included in this cost here. The total cost for that's $27,454,000 and change. So I'll continue. And this is that section that's included in the master plan that was identified. And this is required in order to put the right size box culvert in that ditch. So we came up with another option, Project 1. We're calling this option 2. It upgrades the roadway, repairs the roadway, and it also includes a sidewalk walking trail 10-foot wide on the north side. So this project includes replacing the water line, rehabbing the sewer, and we're rebuilding the end sections of it, and then the middle section, basically, we'd reclaim it and put it back.
When you say the north side, what do you mean by the north?
Top of the page,
The
The
Shenandoah
side
side.
towards Castle Hills, or the side?
the other side,
The other side.
the other side.
Opposite of the ditch.
Yes, sir.
Opposite.
And the reason we had to put the sidewalk in this option, we're including buying right of way so that you have a place to put the sidewalk. So we estimate putting buying 15-foot of right of way on that side. That gives us room to put a 10-foot sidewalk on it. This option is roughly $9 million. And if I'm going too fast, you can stop me. I'm going to just roll through it pretty quick. This is what we're proposing to do in this section option at the Salem intersection. Widen that roadway a little bit, give us a little more room, straighten those lanes out, and then you can see where we're putting in the 10-foot sidewalk. We also, in this option, included a crosswalk to get into Castle Hills. This is a signalized crosswalk, like they had at the college, or like they have at the college. And then this also shows the Mockingbird intersection. In this first section up to the Shenandoah ditch area, we were putting sidewalk on both sides of the road, 10 foot on one side, and then we put a 4-foot standard, which is in portions of that on this side.
Can you go back to that real quick?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry if you mentioned this when I stepped away, but one of the things that's not included in here, but can be included, depending on, direction that we get from council, is a new signal at the intersection with Mockingbird.
That is correct. It's not included in this one.
Right, because currently that signal is just literally one street over.
Mm-hmm.
But we have all the data to back up that signal should be with Mockingbird, right? But you also can't have two, that close to each other. So it would necessitate a conversation, obviously, with the school district. But just so you know, that's not included here, but is something we could pursue once we get there to just help with that intersection.
But you're saying there wouldn't be one at the other place?
I'm sorry?
You're saying it would be a replacement of the signal right now that's overriding?
Yeah, relocation of a signal, however you want to word that. Yeah.
I'm just thinking about the kids that come from the west side that probably cross there at Dean. I think it's Dean Cook.
Yes, Dean Cook.
Yeah.
But those
So-
signals are too close together, is what
Right.
Jesus is saying, in order,
Right.
you would have to.
I mean, they could technically just walk a little further and cross at this signalized intersection.
Exactly. We can't get people to do that on Houston Highway, but maybe we could on Mockingbird. Yeah, that, I agree. We can't
Different,
have-
different folks walking
Right,
here.
we
though.
can't have, yeah, that's true, and we can't have the two that close together, I agree.
And so, I'm going pretty fast. If you have any more questions, please stop me. But, in addition, we included a basic option. This option just includes reclaiming the roadway, replacing the water, and rehabbing the sewer. And this option's around $4 million, 3.8. And then we went through Project 2. Project 2 was the connection between Mockingbird and Ben Jordan. It's a 29-foot roadway. It's concrete, 10-foot sidewalk. It does include a connection to the Lone Tree Walking Trail. And it's some piece of sewer, not a lot because some sections are already served, and storm sewer in that area. And this is about 6.6 million. And the last piece of this is connection of that walking trail through Shenandoah Park. We were asked to look at that and price that out. There's not right-of-way for a large portion of this either.
How much difference in cost would,
Can you go back to option 2?
Oh, James,
We
sorry.
can't talk anymore. We assume going into this that, and this is what I, need direction on. We assume that some version of option 2 would probably be the preferred option for council because it includes, adding a sidewalk, improvising the intersections, doing a more legit, complete reconstruction of the street. But I want to confirm that because, we could slice and dice it a variety of different ways. Similar to North Street, this cost, as you can see, is broken down by utility versus paving and drainage and sidewalks. We could probably even include the drainage on the water and sanitary side of the equation to be funded by utility funds. But you kind of start to see the breakdown that if it's a $9 million project, you're looking at roughly $3 million, from the utility side and $6 million, on the CO side or VS3C side. And you're beginning to get a sense of how tricky this is because typically we only use VS3C dollars for thoroughfare streets and those types of streets and COs for residential. But you can already see that it's going to be nearly impossible to continue that same ideology. We will have no choice possibly but to actually invest COs into thoroughfare streets or collector streets because they're just expensive. And so if we only have $5 million, from VS3C funds, in 1 year, that takes up a whole phase of North Street and could take up all of this. And so that's not doing any other thoroughfare, project. So these large thoroughfare projects, are eating up or would eat up a lot of that funding capacity. So we'll need some decisions, from council on prioritization. Which phase comes first? Is it a first phase for North Street or is it a first phase for Guy Grant?
Can you go back to the details of this option?
Can you talk into the mic?
Do you want to
Yes,
see
I
a
can.
specific one? Okay, this is the Salem intersection.
What's your question?
You're doing a 10-foot wide because you want to connect a trail? Is that?
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be 10 feet.
That is correct. We did 10 feet to provide, ample access for the kids getting back and forth, but also it's that final trail connectivity.
Right.
Thinking that if we built it now, that at one day y'all might connect it all together.
That's where that huge dip is at, right? When you crossing Salem right there?
Yeah,
Oh,
There is-
because of the,
Yeah,
the crown of the road?
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, there's a big dip.
yeah, and it doesn't go like straight, you gotta go like,
Yeah, you gotta go a little to the side.
make it straighter.
And then it's like a roller coaster.
Yes, yes, okay.
I have a question on the 3 lanes. I always get confused when there's 1 lane that goes into a road that has 2 lanes. Is that just for traffic reasons? I mean, couldn't 2 of those lanes go straight ahead as well as one of them turning? And I don't know which one it would be, but it's 2 lanes across the street, across Salem.
We could mark them that way.
I mean,
And we just felt that you would have a, right turn, left turn, and the straight. It just
right.
worked.
The thing that's gonna cost a lot is getting the land on, for the 10-foot, because there's not a lot of, some of those things are pretty close over there on that one side.
Correct. That's why we showed an option that didn't do that.
Sorry, what was it? Mark, I couldn't hear you. What'd you say?
That it would be expensive to acquire the property on the other side,
Where the 10-foot,
and also because some of the property is pretty close to the road.
pretty close.
Mainly one.
And I'm assuming we looked at, could the sidewalk go on the other side? There's
The
just not
ditch
space.
prevents that,
Yeah.
most, at least
ditch.
half of it.
No, I knew there was a ditch there, but I didn't know if there was
And
space.
there's
that
a
we
gas
could-
pipeline in there, and then, but once you put a real flat spot in that slope, then you almost have guardrails or something to prevent the kids from falling off into the
Got it.
ditch.
Okay. It would be better, but practically and
We looked at that
expense-wise,
first,
yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I like that the trail would be eventually connected. I mean, I think that's a big deal. I like this option. Of course, this is in my area too. I understand North Street too. But, Guy Grant's been a problem forever. And it would be nice if the signal was moved. The signal really should have been moved a long time ago. Now, you show a second project where it goes all the way to Ben Jordan. If it just went to this, I can't think of the name of the street, where the bowling alley's on?
Leary?
No, no, no.
No.
It starts,
Yeah,
Anyway,
John Starkbauer?
if you didn't
Lantana?
go, if you didn't go that far, if you didn't go all the way to Ben Jordan, that would make it easier for kids, for the traffic that goes to Howell, and it'd make it easier for the traffic that goes to the elementary
Oh,
school.
you're talking about extending to Leary Lane?
Leary Lane.
Leary Lane,
That's
that's
it.
it.
If it went to Leary Lane, it doesn't have to go all the way to Ben Jordan, but if it went to Leary Lane, it would make traffic easier on Mockingbird too, by Howell School, because then they would go around like this instead of going across traffic. And then they go to the elementary school this way and come back and come out.
And that would take the pressure off that traffic light, because I am concerned about
Right.
the
And
foot
it would-
traffic
and it-
there.
And it would even make the traffic light even more important. But, if you could just do this part and move the traffic light, I'd be happy. And I do understand that North Street needs attention too. But the thing, if you go back to where you broke it into the 2 things, it was,
How far, where do you want me to
the
go?
2, you had a price for water and then you had.
The cost, it was roughly 3 million. It was 3 and 6.
Yeah.
And I say 6 because I think the drainage could probably be, well, no, it has to be done at the same time as
Well,
the street.
that in on Mockingbird, we were putting in the
Yeah.
final drainage,
Yeah.
curb and gutter section
So
through
if
there.
we did this, only 6 would come out of the 15 million, right? Necessarily? Because the other,
Yeah, in theory.
in theory. So that would leave 9 million for a project on North Street too, right?
Assuming council is okay with using COs for thoroughfares. Now, keep in mind that we've yet to talk about relocation of Station 5. We've yet to talk about the residential street program. Although the residential street program, yeah, we haven't talked about drainage projects either, right? So,
After we talk about them all, then.
yeah, I mean, realistically, it would be very difficult, I would say impossible, to have a phase of each going on the same year. And so that's why council will have to make, I think, a decision on which one goes first. Now, this one, it has to all be done at the same time, because it's just, there's just no other way to break it up. But this one that technically could have 2 phases, with one being a utility-centric phase and then one being the sidewalk and street phase. But in terms of the length, it would all have to be done. The piece that would connect Mockingbird to Ben Jordan, we certainly feel like that can wait. And doesn't necessarily have to be included in this planning window of 27 to 29. That could be one of those, park it and do that later, or let development drive it, you know, or something else. But that's just us, and it'd be helpful to get some, you know,
If I may, I want to make sure it's clear, and with all due respect, Jesus has a key point here. I want to make sure. Try to focus on the priorities. Which street, let us handle how it fits in with the money. Don't worry about the money part. Let us deal with that. We know what our parameters are at. I know how you feel about bonds, Mark, but the point is, let us worry about that side, and we'll bring it back to you. But it helps us if we get direction as to how do you see this moving forward. That would help us a lot. That's all I wanted to say.
Well, I would say, I think for me anyway, your assumption's right, that option 2 is the viable, you know, option of the ones, and that would be the one that I'd be in favor of. Yeah.
Yeah, consensus, right, at least here.
and as we mentioned, that also includes some right-of-way acquisition. So our thought would be to also hire a firm to help us with that. Give that a go. But again, understanding which project would be priority would help us plan for, you know, what things we include, you know, in fiscal year 26, for example, to start preparing for that. Now, if you want to see an option that has, you know, both projects going on at the same time, we can certainly show that. But it's obviously going to it's going to be very difficult to do anything else, at least big, you know, that particular year.
Do we have a feel for traffic counts? I know he mentioned some on Guy Grant, but do we know the traffic count in front of Patty Welder? Because that, I mean, if one of them is a lot bigger than the other, that would persuade me as
Yeah.
to which one to do first.
Randy's given me some sign language. 5,000
5,000? And this
in
one
front of
was-
Patty Welder.
Okay, and this one was about 3,400?
4,500.
How much?
45.
Yeah, so they
It's
are
about
about
the
the same.
Yeah.
I mean, from my standpoint, you know, these are the 2 projects that we've identified that, hey, these have been kicked down the road, no pun intended. And we need to address them at some point. So, you know, which one we do first, whether we do them together, whatever it is, I think we just have to figure that out. But these projects have to get done, just for the city and to keep that moving forward. I mean, these are 2 really key projects on the east side of town that are, I think, probably the main ones that we hear about,
Yeah.
you know?
Correct.
And I'd like to see this council address this issue that's kind of been out there, and even if it has some pains to it, which obviously it does with these price tags, you know, I think we've got to do it.
Right.
Yeah, I think the time frame we're talking about, they're going to be going on at the same time, even if one of them starts first. You know, I don't think we want to wait 3 years in between.
I agree. I think realistically, there's going to be some overlap of these,
Yeah.
you know, just because of, and primarily because of North Street, you know,
Yeah.
obviously is a bigger project, it's going to take a long time, you know? And if we're not going to overlap them, then, you know, when you talk about, okay, well, do we do one first and then start
Right.
another, you know, and if so, which one? But-
Right. Well, and again, the good thing is that, you know, Guy Grant is one of those that can, you know, it could be done in 1 year, you know, financially speaking.
Right.
And even if it takes up a big chunk of the CIP that 1 year, at least it's only for that 1 year, versus North Street is going to be an ongoing, you know, pressure on the CIP for, you know, 5, 6 years possibly. But we do know that we have, you know, other, you know, large, you know, Tanglewood Phase 2, for example, trying to plug that back in, right? I mean, we know that that project alone was $4 million on the utility side, $4 million on the street side. And so that'll take up several $1 million, you know, as we look to complete that neighborhood that isn't planned for yet, but we've started, right? So I think we got what we need. Expect that for the March workshop, we'll have some of this a little bit more ironed out, make some specific recommendations, so that we can continue to just get that feedback. I do plan on discussing at our next one-on-one, you know, some other projects like, you know, relocation of Station 5 and some others that we've talked about publicly already, but just to ensure that, you know, they stay front and center, you know, of your minds as we continue this conversation. Okay. Thank you. Mayor, would you like to take a break?
I would love to take a break and stretch. Let's see, we're at, we still got a few more to go. Just 10-minute break.
All right.
Okay.
And by the way,
2:34.
Allison's update, the last one, we intentionally put at the end in case we don't have time to get to it. we'll plug that one into a regular council meeting.
Okay, thank you. We'll break till 2:35. 3 o'clock. All right, 2:39, 2:40, we're gonna reconvene and go to the item on stormwater drainage rate study design overview by Mr. Renia.
Actually, the UDO item is next.
Oh, I'm sorry, I did skip that one. Sorry, Chance. We got proposed unified development ordinance.
All right, Chance, you spearheading this?
Yes.
Excellent.
I think I am. Let me see if I can adjust this for, there we go. Yeah, I say my friend over here next to him was going to be a little surprised, so. All right, so as requested. At the
Hopefully
last-
you're not wearing black, because this is gonna die today.
Oh, I hope not. I'm
Okay.
in my Happy New Year festive clothes.
That's what it is. Black tie, it's a black tie event.
All right, so there are some items that y'all brought up at the council meeting that you want to take a little bit deeper dive on. And so that's what we're going to do a little bit today. We've kind of gone through some of these items, looked at some of the things that y'all mentioned at the meeting, and have offered a few suggestions to kind of help stimulate the conversation as we go through. One of the things that y'all want to understand a little bit better is kind of the engagement background of this. Who did we talk to, when, that kind of thing. Again, this was a 2-year process. A lot of that engagement was focused very early in the process because that's about figuring out what's going on with your code, what is and isn't working, things like that. That's where the engagement is the most important. And then circling back towards the final drafts period where we say, okay, here's what we did about it. And so that's kind of the two sides of that. So kind of the big list. So you have a steering committee. That was 3 council members, 3 P&Z members, or 3 planning commission members. Project website. We had some online engagement, map surveys, things like that for the public component. The general public doesn't get super interested in codes. They're very technical. Stakeholder meetings. We had 94 total people that we invited to the stakeholder meetings. That crossed over real estate, engineering, architecture, board commission, your developer, contractor, builders. We've noticed that in Victoria, those are kind of a merged entity to some extent. Plan commission, some community groups. We also had some conversations with out-of-town builder developers along the way, and a few interactions with the Builders Association. Joint meeting, we've had 4 of these council workshops where we've come and presented to y'all like this. Planning commission open house, and then Julie's team leading up some follow-up conversations with key groups. That's your developer design professionals, as well as Builders Association, city manager support, and then some individual meetings that have taken place when people have called in. So a good bit of engagement. These types of efforts tend to be very, very technical, so they tend to focus very heavily on code users as you go through it. The first of the subject items that we were going to touch on is the separation residential adjacency standards. That was one of the things that we knew y'all wanted to talk about. Kind of to get this started, it's to first understand, y'all are already doing some of this kind of thing in Victoria already. Your historic districts, Plaza Benavides, primary residential areas for signage, billboards, animal ordinance, SOB ordinance, and alcohol regulations, all lean into this proximity-based regulatory method. So these are places where you're kind of already doing this. In some cases, we're just bringing that into the code. For example, your alcohol regulations, we're just bringing that into the code. So what it is, we actually went through the draft UDC or UDO and looked at what is happening where. What is the distance requirement? What's it a distance measured from? Is it residential? Is it residential plus churches? Things like that. The reason we lean towards separation standards is that in the absence of traditional zoning, this is really your best tool out there to deal with compatibility issues. That's one of the things that we have heard during the engagement process is there are some fundamental compatibility things that do come up. You'll see these kind of really fall into 3 big categories though. You've got this top group that are kind of your auto-oriented uses. It's your auto dealerships, auto repair, truck stops, things like that. Your middle tier are usually kind of like your specialized groups that have some kind of unique aspect to them. It's either a state law type of element, or it is something related to basically trying to prevent a nuisance versus having to deal with the nuisance afterward. So, your kennels, things like that, those are, barking dog situations. That's trying to address it up front versus through enforcement later. But others of these are very informed by either state law or case law. That's your alcohol regulations, SOB regulations, things like that. This bottom group is what we would call your industrial heavy site types of things. So it's kind of these three different types, and I think you might think about them as how you want to regulate those by type as we go forward. We did take a look at just a few rights of way, just to kind of give you an idea of how big is 100 feet, so to speak. So Houston Highway, typical right of way is about 100 feet. Navarro Street, if you're south of Loma Vista, it's about 75. If you're north, about 110. And North Main is a right of way of about 110 feet. So you can kind of picture what that looks like in your mind. That'll help you understand what those distances actually mean. So Julie's team went and did a few test cases on these separations just to give you an idea of what they look like and what's the impact. So this one on the left, that's caliber collision. And what you see here is there's a multifamily that's kind of to the west side of it, and then you've got a neighborhood that's to the southeast. So this would have gotten picked up in the proximity buffer for that, and would have had some issues with the compatibility. What this ordinance has in it now is a waiver provision where you could have gotten that waived through a specific process.
Or variance to council,
Or
correct?
variance, yes. The second one on the right, that's Discount Tire. So that's located a little bit differently with some separation from the neighborhood. This sails through with flying colors. It's a easy one to process. Oh, hang on, here we go. This is the Matt Hike dealership. So this picks up kind of the backside residential. And so when we went through this and kind of looked at the impacts, we have a few thoughts for things you could consider. One is that this standard currently applies to any residential, meaning multifamily as well as single family. You could look at trimming the effectiveness of that to where it's just applying to your single family, townhouse, duplex, triplex. That's one approach you could take. You could also recognize that if it's a commercial property on what we would consider a commercial frontage. So for y'all, that's your secondary arterials, primary arterials, expressways. That if you have that frontage, then maybe you're exempted from that. We would say that these changes, we would limit those to those auto-oriented types of uses, versus some of your other uses like the really heavy industrial and things like that. Another option is to consider an alternative where you could have an alternative where they put in some type of landscape buffer. Using a density of trees, shrubs, things like that that can serve to reduce the nuisance. So that is the.
And I just want to clarify that the examples that are shown are simply just for reference, not because they're going to be impacted.
Right.
An existing business that does have houses within that 100 feet, they're grandfathered in, for lack of a better word, they wouldn't be impacted. So those are simply shown just to give you a point of reference as to just real life example, but to be clear, if you're existing, nothing's changing.
The stuff that you said to me is just options quickly, and I know we.
Can you go back?
Probably won't have a chance to go.
We should discuss these as we
Yeah.
talk each one.
Well, along major thoroughfares seems to be the easiest way, and I think the separation, if you look at across from the mall by the quick serve restaurants where there's still residential right there on Navarro, which, typically you would expect there to be commercial there. It's going to be difficult, I'm afraid, with the commercial separations to put anything along there if we enact this. But I'm just trying to look at some way of getting the stuff in the right location, and maybe it is based on what type of street you have frontage on.
I'm
Yeah.
just concerned about the back street, using this example, the last one they have. I don't want us to say, because you're on this type of a street, that your commercial can now go all the way back to the back of your property. We already have a separation, I think, of at least 30 feet, and that's my only concern, is that we word it properly if we looked at that aspect of it.
Yeah, and one example of this is the area where the 5 quick service restaurants are, because we know that we do have some residents on Bingham, I think is what it's called, that, you know, approach us every so often with some concerns of the noise coming from the 5 quick service restaurants. There was supposed to be a car wash. You know, you may recall that site plan. I don't think that's gonna be a car wash anymore. But there's that vacant property in the back that, you know, the developer has suggested, you know, I think at one point he did suggest, you know, an auto mechanic, you know, purpose. And so, you know, it's that type of situation that we're trying to, you know, prevent because of the residents that even though they're right across the street, you know, would be impacted. Did you want to add something, Julie?
You know, the feedback I've gotten on some of this is it really limits then redevelopment areas where you're on some corridor that maybe in the 50s was more like a residential street, and we've just continually widened it till we have no more easement left. And we have a lot of those streets that at some point you could see in the future where, you know, it starts slowly turning into a commercial corridor type of thing, but you can never allow it if we go to this level.
Yeah,
that we
well, and
have
keep in mind,
now.
if you go back to the slide on that one, keep in mind that this is very specific types of businesses that we're talking about. It can be easy for, you know, I think, for example, Mr. Swearingen, you know, when he verbalized that comment, it might lead somebody to believe that it impacts all types of businesses that might be trying to pop up, you know, next to a residential area, and that's not true. It's very, very, you know, specific type of businesses that we're talking about. And so let's just not forget that yes, we're limiting the type of business that could go into those undeveloped sites or potential redeveloped sites, but we're not completely preventing it from happening.
Yeah, I met earlier today with Mr. Swearingen, and he was bringing up example of like a Whataburger, but when we talk about limiting certain businesses, it is literally only this list. So it is not all commercial. It is auto oriented commercial uses, and then this list of, you know, kennels, payday loans, pawn shops, sports shooting ranges, brew pubs, nightclubs, things that are very incompatible with single-family residential. So all retail, all office, all restaurant-type uses are not subject to this regulation.
So would the Texan fall under truck stop and repair?
So, no, the truck stop would be defined as a business that actually provides services to truckers. I know that sometimes people spend the night in a parking lot of the Texan, but really the Texan is a full-service gas station. It does not have showers for truckers. It doesn't have repair facility for the big trucks. So when we say truck stop, it's really like a Big Vic's type truck stop that has a full service venue for
So do we
for
have
truckers.
that definition lined out in the UDO somewhere that says what this code refers to as truck stop? So that if there's at a later date, there's not some confusion on what was meant by it? Because I consider the Texan a truck stop if they're staying there overnight.
All right, so truck stop, we actually do have that defined in here, and it talks specifically about where heavy load vehicles are serviced, repaired, or maintenance of such vehicles is undertaken, which includes facilities for dispensing fuels in addition to that, but you can still have all the incidental stuff. So basically, they would actually have to be providing true full services. So it's even though you think of the Texan as a truck stop, that's not the land use definition, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So the and repair is the important thing in that phrase.
And the definition
Not
of
or.
truck stop.
Yeah.
So Love's Travel Centers, they provide all sorts of, like Love's Travel Centers usually have a lot more amenities, a lot more requirements and things, repair stuff for, that's more of a truck stop than a full-service gas station that welcomes and invites truckers.
So is that helpful? Any particular direction y'all are thinking on this? Are you comfortable with this as is, or any tweaks?
I'm comfortable with it.
I'm not comfortable as it is. And I'm looking at kind of auto dealership is kind of, I would like to explore a little bit of what it would look like if we detailed it out by frontage.
Okay.
I'd like to get a definition of the payday loans and what's a 300 feet separation. It says same use for residential. Can you explain that?
I can't hear you.
Payday loans, and more further explanation as to why that's there and the
Why
300
is
feet.
it a 300
And how, and what the definition is of a payday loan was actually the,
So payday loans, so this is something that most cities actually do create a separation requirement on. Payday loans is basically where, you go in, it's a storefront, and they will issue you a personal loan, typically at a high interest rate, and they tend to be sometimes associated with predatory lending practices, things like that. We do have a specific definition, if you'll give me just a moment.
So it's because of their clientele that we're putting a 300-foot separation and not 150-foot?
Sorry.
his comment is, so it's because of the clientele?
It's not clientele-based. It's generally based on they'll occupy spaces. They tend to be a low volume. There's a number of reasons that cities choose to regulate them. It's not even clientele-based. It's more to the view that they tend to be predatory by nature. That's been the general experience, though.
I know that doesn't get talked a lot about here, but it certainly gets talked about quite a bit. I think even the legislature, took up the topic of payday lending businesses. So it is a typical topic that gets discussed and that's included in something like this.
As far as
But we can certainly, obviously take it out.
Yeah. As far as the specific definition, it's a short-term cash loan business, most commonly based on a borrower's personal check held for future deposit or an electronic access to the borrower's bank account. And that ties back to a legislative definition.
So that would trigger a 300-foot separation?
Yes.
Yes.
If somebody wanted to build a new one.
Yeah.
Obviously, if it's existing, nothing happens.
Yeah, if it's existing, you're fine.
That doesn't
We
make
s-
sense to me.
We see that when a neighborhood declines sometimes, and you see one go in, then you see a kind of a ripple effect of all of a sudden you have a number of payday loans in a strip center or in a neighborhood, and it just really signals an overall decline in the area, and that's really why there's usually separation requirements so that you're not having a clustering.
But again, obviously, we could take them out.
I think the fact that we're,
It's
the fact that,
loud noise, it's not.
well, I think the fact that we're restrictive now has caused it to not be a problem. And so I'm hesitant to loosen the reins.
I don't see a reason for it to be either there, because I'm thinking, okay, then
Or a pawn shop.
why wouldn't a pawn shop,
300 foot.
a bank, anybody that lends money, or a resale shop? I mean, you're putting them in the same category, pawn shop, a resale shop. It
That's
just
what I'm
doesn't make sense to me.
Pawn shop and,
It's not the same.
You resell stuff. Why is
Right.
it different?
same thing.
Same
This
thing.
is-
I'm just trying to figure out what the nuisance is.
There is no nuisance.
Yeah.
Something that's easy to pull, if y'all want
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, I mean, if y'all aren't grasping the reason for including it, well, let's just not include it. We could pull it out. And that's the sense I'm getting, so we'll pull it out. Not a big deal. We'll pull out payday loans and pawn shop from this category.
Can we look at changing the number of feet? Leaving it in there, but making the number of feet be significantly less, like 100?
What's the nuisance, though? I mean, I'm thinking of a payday loan shop that goes into a convenience store.
Well, Julie just described a residential area that one could go into,
What's the nuisance?
Reduction in property value.
a higher traffic.
Yeah, I mean, again,
There you
Be honest.
data would, in the planning world and in city community development, the data would suggest that the existence of these businesses in a neighborhood deteriorate the neighborhood.
Right.
And that's either something that we agree with because it's proven and it's tracked and it's shown in our world and our profession that that's true. And that's why some cities try to eliminate these. But again, if council does not see it that way, then we just pull them out.
But I guess the problem I'm having with it is the way our city has organically grown. And you can still find houses that are on Navarro, right, up and down Navarro, or Red River, or Airline. And how do you decide that as one starts slowly changing over to a commercial area, or, you know, starts changing, that you can't put it next door to that house, but 2 doors down it would be fine, and you just stop some development in the future by a regulation that, you know, if we were to put it more towards major thoroughfares and...
One potential amendment is to eliminate for payday loans and pawn shops specifically, eliminate the proximity to residential, but still keep the distance from other pawn shops and payday loans to prevent the clustering, which studies do show signify a downturn in the area.
Well, I'd like to know everybody else's thought about tying some of this separation items to the frontage road, the classification of the road, because I understand what Dr. Young's saying about you don't want a pawn shop popping up in the middle of a neighborhood, but if they're backed up to a neighborhood, and if they're on Navarro and behind them is a residence, you've eliminated that. You know, you couldn't do it here.
Particularly when you're talking about property line to property line.
Yeah.
Because that line's gonna hit, so, you know.
I would like to add tattoo shops to that. If you're gonna be, you know, that specific about a payday loan or a pawn shop, tattoo shops. How come that wasn't included? We've had issues with that. So, you know,
I think what we're all seeing is the struggle when you take a 200-year-old city and you try to add zoning type concepts to it.
Without zoning,
it's
yes.
difficult. I mean, and I'm not saying it shouldn't be done, but I think I'm not sure we're all in agreement on what qualifies and what doesn't and what that separation should be.
The thing is, somebody can always get a waiver from the property owners or get a variance. That's what
Right.
we have it in there for.
I could go with 100,
The problem with
with
pawn
150.
shops and payday loans is crime. There's cash. And wherever there's a large amount of cash, there's crime. Now, I'm not saying just because you're separated by 300 feet, it's going to solve your problem.
It's not gonna solve the problem.
But, I mean, if somebody wants to come in and put a payday or a pawn shop and they can't do the 300 feet, then they can ask for a variance, or they can get a waiver from the people behind, or we can change the distance, whatever you want to do. But we need to come up with some guidelines for these things.
Well, I like tying it to what type of street it's on. What's the frontage road? Because then we could limit to where they go, and it's not
You're
stuck
talking
in the
about
neighborhood.
zoning, basically.
No. Can you pull because that in essence that's very similar to the recommendation on
Yeah.
the second bullet here.
Yeah, basically, that if you've got a frontage on a primary arterial or expressway, that's an out on the residential proximity.
Right, so it helps protect the true neighborhood, right, from having one of these things pop up in the actual neighborhood. But it wouldn't prevent it from popping up, you know, along Navarro or Main, regardless of whether there's houses in the back or not, which I think is the mayor's point.
Right.
And so all of Red River and all of Airline can now be commercial because we would be allowing that.
Well, we don't have anything now that would prevent it,
Yeah.
Yeah, it can't.
because we don't have zoning.
And right now,
Okay?
I mean, one side of Ben Jordan on Airline is more commercial, kind of. There's still a little bit of residential, and then it filters more into residential as you go past on the other side of Ben Jordan. But, I mean, I think that you start limiting,
Well, these separations that say next to residential are what would prevent it at this point.
if we went down what's in that table. Yes. And that's what I'm saying, as the city ages and different areas change and turn over and everything, I'm just always thinking also about Navarro across on the other side of the mall. You're limiting yourself. You know, you look at those houses and you're like, that should be a commercial piece of property. It's on that stretch of road. Now we're just gonna say, hey, here's this regulation on what we want to have there and what we don't want to have there. And
But if you
what
think
if
about
someone
what we
puts in
would
a-
want to have there,
But what if someone puts in a strip center and one of them has a small little payday loan center, or someone puts a new gas station like you see at Crestwood and Navarro, and there's at least a check cashing place there. I don't know if it's a loan place,
I'm not sure that would qualify as this.
What is it?
check cashing place.
Check cashing?
That's inside a convenience store?
Check cashing doesn't typically qualify as a payday.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's different.
It does, oh, does not.
But you're telling, I don't know, it's just.
We would be telling, I mean, I follow the argument, but specifically on Navarro, right? We would want a restaurant, we would want retail, right? Across from the mall, right? That would be a compatible use, right? We're suggesting that with this requirement, again, this doesn't apply to all types of businesses. It's only very specific ones. And so I just want to remind you that we're not suggesting that these can't be a business. It's just certain types. But again, I think the solution that I think the mayor is proposing is one that we can further explore. That suggests that, you know, if the property is along a major thoroughfare, it's exempt. And we can put maps together. We can, you know, resend out the thoroughfare master plan if it helps. You know, you get a sense of which those roads are. I'm just thinking out loud as sort of as a compromise, you know, between what's being proposed and the concern around the major thoroughfares. Because I don't hear any concern around this applying within a neighborhood or close to an existing neighborhood. It's more so the concern around the major thoroughfares is what I'm hearing.
Could we
Specifically.
list those areas?
Excuse,
Could we list those areas that it would be a defense to them wanting to do this, that the property was located on a, whatever the.
well, that's what I'm saying, if you have frontage on one of the,
Right.
you know, which
Can
you
you pull up the
consider
table again?
thoroughfare or major thoroughfare or arterial or whatever.
Now, we have to be careful how we word this because there are certain
Oh.
things that I would argue we should not promote to be right across the mall, right?
Oh, I agree.
Sexually oriented business, right? Shooting range, right? I mean, there are certain uses here.
What's wrong with an indoor shooting range?
I don't think this is what that's suggesting.
Doesn't specify.
It says a sports shooting range. What's wrong with the indoor shooting range?
That's not an indoor shooting
It says
range.
sport shooting range, and I believe it's outdoor in the definition.
Yeah, it's defined as outdoor.
Okay,
Then that needs to be specified.
call it outdoor shooting range.
This verbiage is confusing.
And is that shooting,
And that's why Julie made the comment after we suggested to exempt thoroughfares, that to only have that apply to the first section of this, but still have it apply for the other sections, so that you could have, you know, your truck sales, auto repair shops, car washes, you know, auto dealership, you know, those things, that wouldn't be a problem on a major thoroughfare. But once you start getting into the heavier uses, that we would want to retain that on a major thoroughfare, especially as you get down to the third section. That's why Julie made that comment.
On the payday loans and pawn shops, I'd like some direction on, there's two specific rules. There's separation from the same use, so you don't have the cluster effect, and then there's also separation from residential. So are we okay with the same use so that we're not clustering them?
yes.
It's just the residential that we want to work on?
Yes.
Okay. That's helpful, thank you.
And shouldn't kennels be specified as outdoor kennels and indoor kennels?
We actually have a few slides specific on the kennel,
wait, there's more.
Kennel
I
conversation.
want to say, I'm not okay with removing residential from payday loans, and I'm not sure I'm the only one that feels that way. So I'm,
Say that again.
She's not okay with removing the residential space requirement for payday loans.
I'm not okay either. I'm fine with the way it is.
Well, I just want to reiterate that the chart was made for just simple illustrative to make it real easy to kind of have this discussion. The definitions and there's more specific use standards when you actually read into the code about, the kennel, for example, has an exemption that it doesn't apply if it's wholly within a building. And then of course we have the definition of a truck sales is repair, or a truck stop is repair and not just a gas station. So this was just put together for ease of discussion.
So with this right here, the Harley dealership wouldn't have been allowed?
The Harley Davidson,
5 points?
yeah, probably not.
Probably
Well,
not.
they would have been allowed had they gone through the variance process, right? You could have approved them to go.
I don't know how it was allowed without the required parking and other site plan requirements that are already in effect. So I think it predates all of that, which is a good example of non-conforming or grandfathered uses.
Yeah, this
Yes,
is all
but it's
proactively.
kind of a
Firestone's another
recognizable
example.
Harley dealership. I think it's one of the smallest in the whole nation, but it
Yeah.
sure has character. And I like it sitting there on that corner.
Yeah,
Again-
it's small
Again,
but
this
famous.
is proactive, this is looking forward, this is
Yeah,
not,
It's already there. It's
Yeah.
I know, but I'm saying, but
You want another one just like it?
it has great character. It fits in that
Had
location.
another one just like it, it wouldn't be as great a character.
You might convert some building that wasn't it already into
Well,
something else that's next to a residence.
I want to stress, land use regulations are really all about scale. Even when you're talking about, residential uses and smaller lots and density, your problems don't start existing until there's density. So when you do have small niche businesses, those are great examples of variances if the code doesn't allow it, because so often it's the scale of things that really is what sometimes triggers the issues and the incompatibility with other land uses.
I would like to add something to it, and it goes back to what Josie said. Tattoo parlors,
Could you get to the mic a little bit closer?
tattoo parlors should be listed
Yes.
up there. I have a lot of complaints about them in neighborhoods.
What's that?
Tattoo parlors.
Oh,
They create traffic problems, and
They're open to all hours of
I've
the
had
night.
numerous calls on that. And I would prefer that they no longer end up in neighborhoods. I don't think it's appropriate. So I wouldn't mind adding it to the list.
I would like to see it added too.
One way we could handle tattoo parlors, because they're actually, tattoo parlors is more of a personal service type use, but we can't specifically call out tattoo parlors. But a lot of the complaints are because people use them as home-based businesses. There is a home-based business section. We could say, that says how you have a home-based business. We could add it to a prohibited home-based business, so they actually have to go get a storefront. Because I think the complaints that we have most often heard are when people are running is a tattoo artist out of their home.
Right.
on that list also, did I see correctional facility?
Yes, it's in the
What?
third group.
Correctional facility.
So how's that gonna work when they're gonna have to go through a variance process if they decide to ever build a new jail downtown?
Depending on where it's located. Yeah.
Church, school, residential, oh, yeah, be a heck of a problem.
We know where it's gonna go.
We do?
Right.
It's gonna go really close to the courthouse somewhere. And there'll be a residence within that boundary. I just don't know why we're putting in a regulation that we know we're just gonna waive later.
Well, this council would, we don't know about the next council.
Yeah, but we gotta work with our county partners too at some time. And
Okay. So let me kind of take it back because I think we're having, a lot of different conversations at the same time, which I think are needed. But I guess if you bring it back to the chart, and I'll ask some very, very specific questions. Are we okay with having separation limitations in general? I get that we might disagree on the list or the number of feet, but is there agreement that a section like this ought to be included in the UDO?
Yes,
Yes.
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 Part of it.
Okay. As Chance suggested we can take these and look at them at one section at a time. The top part, which is all centered around auto shop, one recommendation is to allow those in major thoroughfares, right? Which was a suggestion similar to what the mayor suggested. So for that category alone, what are your thoughts on excluding them if they're going to be located on a major thoroughfare?
Well, since it's
They
my
would still have-
suggestion, I'm
Right.
for that.
I'm just trying to get,
They would still have to have the screening fences.
I would agree
and
with that.
all-
100%. Yeah, screening fences,
and building setbacks. and-
correct, building set, nothing else would change, in that requirement. As Julie also suggested, we could also look at other requirements like landscaping and others that, we could look at incorporating without having to have the foot distance requirement. But are we okay with excluding this first section?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. The second section, or let me go to the third section, because that one might be easier. The third section, we would suggest leave as is. I do get the mayor's point that there's probably some of these that we're aware that they're coming, but that's why there's a variance process, right? And so, we could certainly pull out, correctional facility, or we could, write in an exception that, it doesn't apply to, the county.
Is
if-
correctional facility, the definition, what's included in that? Is a halfway house considered part of the correctional facility chain of?
Halfway house has a separate
Yeah,
definition.
it's a
You'll get
separate.
that.
Well, as he pulls it up, I would suggest that the third section, we simply leave as is, because I would suggest that it's important to have that distance, and I used the Texas concrete example. On Tuesday, this would fall into that. We would obviously have to be mindful of it, as well, because I know one of the questions we had internally was, okay, well, if we ever go into, building out a new solid waste facility, where would we put it? Would we have to honor our own code? Things like that. That's certainly something for us to be mindful of, right? Certainly, we can always give ourselves a variance, but, just something to think about.
And just curious, power plant, I mean, is that electrical generation other than solar?
He can pull up the definition of power plants.
Right, because,
I know that's all utility scale.
Correctional facility, a facility that is generally designed for the confinement, correction, and rehabilitation or of adult and/or juvenile offenders sentenced by a court.
they're sentenced to halfway houses.
Big word.
Halfway house.
Confinement is the big word.
What was that, Mark?
Confinement was the big word. Yeah, halfway house, you're not confined.
Correct, that's the difference.
Okay.
The mayor's loving this wordsmithing.
Surrounded by lawyers.
So again, for now, we would recommend leaving the third, as is to apply across the board. If we need to have a conversation, for a carve-out correctional facility, we can certainly, explore that.
And power plant again, did that include?
Power plant is an industrial facility using solar, wind, water, electric, or other sources to generate electric power. So it's the generation.
Industrial facility.
So it's generation, not distribution.
Right.
Dust.
And let's clarify, so this
At a solar
would
field.
apply inside city limits,
Right.
not ETJ.
You're very unlikely to see one of these inside city limits.
Correct. I recognize that there are some projects that are being discussed to be in the ETJ. But
Why have the ETJ, I mean,
we can't control, it's state law on what we can regulate in the ETJ versus not.
I don't know.
Representative Bachnight can,
Change that.
It'd probably go away altogether, but I
Yeah,
I just want to make sure that we're not just hurting ourselves down the road with regulation that we don't even have to worry about.
right. Well, and
But
keep in mind that
something
we
that-
can always amend these later, right? We could go down the path and, something didn't work out, or similar to how we treat, issues now, right? Think of the issues that used to come before you as recurring variances. And then, the city got smart and said, well, you know what? There's a bunch of variances that are coming, to planning commission and council, so maybe it just makes sense to make an adjustment in the code, right? same thing, you know. We go down this path of approving a new UDO. If we start seeing, you know, a common denominator, an influx of, you know, certain types of variances, then that's trigger for us to reassess. Same way that we've done, you know, the code always, right? Anyway, so again, the third section I would recommend, I'm not hearing any major opposition to leaving it as is, but obviously that's your direction, your prerogative.
I'm fine.
Leave it the way it is. Leave it the way it is.
The second section, we for sure already got direction that for payday loans and pawn shops, we want to remove the residential requirement,
No.
but keep the separation requirement. I get that we have 2 council members that have verbalized not in agreement with that, but I sense the majority of council is in agreement with eliminating the residential requirement, but keeping the separation requirement.
So let me just say this, and I haven't commented on this. I'm somewhat on the fence here, because here's my thinking on it.
Can you speak a little better into the mic?
Oh, I'm sorry.
there?
I'm somewhat on the fence here, but here's my thinking on it, is that I don't necessarily see the potential harm to a neighborhood, although I hear what you're saying, Mr. Garza, in terms of studies about payday loans and pawn shops and that sort of thing. I don't necessarily see it that would be on this list. What I'm looking at is from the standpoint of, are those really the type of businesses we want? And if we don't really want those businesses, then why not put them on this list versus businesses that we would want? You know, if we had things on there that we definitely want, for example, you know, brew pubs, shooting range, I mean, you know, those sort of things that would be an asset to the community, then I struggle more with having those on there, quite honestly, than the types of businesses that we really don't want to promote having in the city to begin with. So that's where I'm, you know, the fact that they're close to residential or not isn't as,
Well, and
I guess doesn't impress on me as much as, I don't really care if we had payday loans or pawn shops anyway. But again, that's, I mean, and I didn't mean it quite the way it came out, but you know what I'm saying? Those aren't necessarily the kind of things that I look
Right.
at as economic drivers for our city over the next 20 years.
no, definitely not. So the big problem with those two really comes down to a lot of the clustering, which is why I really strongly suggest is making them separated from each other. So if you drop the residential, is there an appetite to increase that from like 300 to 500 to prevent that clustering? And because if you drop the residential, then you're therefore opening up a lot more sites. So would there be an appetite to reduce residential, but to increase them from the separation from each other to maybe 500 feet?
I think we leave it at 300.
Why can't you move those to the thoroughfare thing?
What?
Well, you could. Yeah, one suggestion I was going to make in getting down to the, to this section, that clearly there's more of a disagreement in how we treat the items that are in the middle section. So I was going to suggest picking some and in essence moving them up to the first section that would make the list of ones that are exempt on a major thoroughfare. Now, keep in mind, as Julie suggested, these were all put into this table for ease of conversation, but on things like brew pubs, the clubs and the night lounges, those are very specific separation from hospitals, churches, schools, residential, park. So there's other elements to those,
The separation requirement's exhibited in downtown for a brew pub because of in the entertainment district, not downtown. So there's some flexibility in some of those as well, if you actually read.
which goes to, Dwayne. I was like, Councilmember Crocker, Dwayne, about focusing on the ones that you do want, right? And so, exempting brew pubs in the entertainment district downtown sends a message, right, that we prefer the brew pub to be located in that area, which is another benefit that traditional zoning, presents cities in saying this is the type of business that we think makes most sense in this corridor versus this one, versus this. So again, in the absence of zoning, we're trying to figure out ways to achieve at least some of the objectives that come from that.
And I'm not, I guess I would take a little bit of objection to what you said from the standpoint that if somebody would come in and put a brew pub in the parking lot at the mall, but they're going to be within 500 feet of those houses across there, I don't care if they bring a new business to Victoria that's a benefit to the city, that's an asset to the city, that adds to our tax base, that our citizens want. I don't care if they're in downtown, on the north side, on the east side, on the west side, it doesn't matter. The whole idea here is this applies to businesses, and we should be looking at it in terms of what types do we want? And I don't want brew pubs or something that we did want. I mean, I know that's the example that came up, but I don't want to stifle that potential if it could be an asset to the city. And whether they're going in downtown or on the north side, if this would impact them, I mean, they're going to benefit the city as a whole. So I think that's what we ought to be looking at. I wouldn't intentionally try to drive that type of business to downtown, just from the standpoint that I want the market to be such that somebody who knows that business, knows that industry, knows where they want to put that in terms of a population base. I don't know that
Right.
business, I want them to be able to do that.
Sure, and to be clear, we're not saying that it can't be anywhere else. We're
Yeah.
simply saying that if it is anywhere else, the exception for the downtown entertainment district in part is because of the parks that are located downtown.
Right.
But, so we're not suggesting that you can't put it, somewhere else. That's already going to come with the TABC requirement and our requirement, for distance, that you can't be, within, a church or a school. So that's already in place.
Yeah, these are standards you
I
already
think
have.
the only thing that we're really adding to that is the residential neighborhood piece. So if you want to eliminate the residential piece or move it to where it just doesn't apply to the major thoroughfares, but obviously legally it would still have to comply with the distance from a school, the church, that won't change because that's a separate thing.
To me, the major thoroughfares make sense as a,
Right.
it's kind of a compromise in the middle of that.
This is really in the weeds, but why is park listed separately? And I'm just thinking,
Park because of kids being in parks. So the typically in land use, you take into account the fact that you are going to have small kids at parks. And so some communities choose to not have certain types of businesses near where you're going to have a cluster of kids. That's the whole premise around it being school.
well, I know, and I'm just thinking of a location like the pump house. So if someone turned that one day and turned it into a brew pub, right? What a great location for a brew pub, in my mind,
Right.
but it's right there at the park.
That's why we would recommend a variance.
Yeah, that's why the variance and the waiver process is there.
Well-
There's always gonna be exceptions to everything. We can't build the UDO to include all the things that might happen. That's why you have the variance and the waiver process.
Right, but I also see some of these as,
Hindrance.
we tackle this at times when we look at things, we don't even have this as an issue. It's never been an issue. Why are we putting in some other regulation that may stop something? As opposed, now we're gonna have some regulation in here on what can go where, and we don't even have the issue, but we're creating barriers on this front end.
Sure. I would argue that we do have the issue because we do have residents that come before us complaining about noise and bass coming from establishments that would probably fall under the category of a brew pub or a
Nightclub
lounge
lounge.
and things like that.
Brew pub.
Now, so I do think that issue we do hear about, and those are the types of things that we're trying to prevent in new development.
And just to note, your current regulations already do this for brew pubs and for alcohol sales. All we do is pull in your existing regulation.
But we added the residential piece, right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
new.
That's what I'm saying. So for those two sections, the only new piece is the residential neighborhood piece. The distance thing to schools and all that stuff, that's already in there, that's separate.
But I mean, I can understand it from, instead of just eliminating it, the problem we have should be addressed through a outdoor amplified sound standpoint attached to a bar or something like that. That's what created that problem on the corner. The addition of an outdoor area with amplified sound. Before that, it had a nightclub and a lounge there, and it never was an issue.
Good point. So again, so we can get some clear direction moving forward, because we do have other slides. On the kennel section, we have some slides specific to talk about kennels, in part because of, the conversation that started with the county, bringing that up. Can you go back? Because we need to finish that.
Sorry, I thought you were jumping to the kennels.
So,
I like the concept as a compromise of moving the payday loans, the pawn shop and tattoo parlors up to the section dealing with if it's on a major thoroughfare, that can be an exception. But I would still like to leave them on that chart somewhere.
Right.
And I'd like to leave the same use and residential.
okay. Again, I would need to hear from the rest of council because I have a good view of everybody. Y'all are like, you're looking at me. I see everybody else, and everybody else is shaking, nodding their head yes. When I say that the majority of council would like to remove these from a residential requirement.
I think you should take a vote on it. I personally don't want a pawn shop near my neighborhood.
Okay, well, in the absence of the mayor being here, from the council member, the 6 that are here, how many of you would like to remove the distance requirement from residential, but keeping the separation?
How much would like to
Remove the distance between each one?
I didn't understand.
So that's two things. So there's two things that there's a distance to residential
Yes.
and a distance from each other to prevent clustering.
Oh,
Right? So what I'm hearing is that the majority of council wants to remove the limitation to residential, but keeping the element of being able to not cluster them
So
together.
it's truly anti-zoning,
But you asked how many wanted to remove
because in
residential.
zoning, you try to push certain
Zoning,
well, I'm just saying, like, this is gonna be this corridor, this is gonna be the auto mile and stuff like that.
Correct, but zoning
This
wouldn't
would be
even
the
do
pawn
this.
shop mile.
Right,
This
but
would
zoning
be-
wouldn't even do this, because if in a traditional zoning, you would zone a whole corridor, let's say red, right? In typical zoning, that'd be commercial. You could theoretically still have, a red next to a red, next to a red, next to a red. So even in traditional zoning, you would have the same type of business right next to each other,
Correct.
because they're all red.
That's why I said anti.
Right. So this distance would simply prevent the clustering. So again, and Mayor, we're trying to get clear direction on where the majority of council sits on this question, which is how many council members would like to remove the restriction from residential distance for payday and pawn shops, but keeping the separation so that we prevent the clustering.
Well, I think we should prevent the clustering. I would like to see it tied up in that top level on a thoroughfare, because we're just not.
Or
built-
that.
Right.
we're just not built out in a manner that, and I understand what you say, the variance process, but you're just throwing a regulation in there that you know that everyone's gonna have to come have a variance. I just don't see it as a workable thing. We want them not to be in a residential location, but they're always gonna be up against a residence. They're always gonna touch one.
Well, if we.
Okay, so again, just for sake of time, we can't lose this thought. So how many council members then would like to do what the mayor suggests, which is simply moving them up, meaning they would be allowed or exempted if they're on a major thoroughfare?
I need to know what a thoroughfare is.
So we would do primarily arterial, which would be Navarro, Houston Highway. I can't remember, it may or may not include Main Street. And then, of course, the loop would be your primary arterial. So we can move all of the first 2 sections up. You're still going to have separation requirements for nightclubs and brew pubs and things against hospitals, churches, and schools because of TABC rules that are existing on the books, so that won't change. So it'll just be the residential for the 2 sections, and those primary arterials are primarily Houston Highway, Navarro, the loop, and I'd have to check on Main and
And we
John
can provide a map
So,
Tattoo parlors.
to help with that.
so they would move up and the residential requirement wouldn't affect them if they were on the,
It would,
Only if they're off of, to the mayor's point, right?
I don't have a problem with that.
And I would say if they have frontage.
So it would protect, the feet distance in residential would remain,
Okay.
except for if it's on a piece of property that's on arterial major thoroughfare,
And we would
is
limit
what the
that
mayor suggested.
to properties with frontage on those rather than backing up and like saying fronting on a neighborhood street.
No, it's
No,
got to
it's-
front on one of the.
It has to have frontage, the front street, okay. We can
And
easily write
I
that.
would make it a minimum frontage requirement.
Yes.
Well, you have minimum lot frontage requirements for most businesses to go
Okay.
in unless they were and all the existing.
Yeah, I don't want to
So,
say
yeah.
there's a square,
Okay.
Yeah.
of 1 foot.
Just don't
Right.
That's an easy change, we can do that.
consider it a major thoroughfare.
Except for Salem Road specifically, got to write that. Okay, Julie suggested moving the second section up to apply to the same exception on major thoroughfare. Is that what we want to do?
The second
Th-
section?
Yeah. Which would apply to commercial amusement outdoor, sports shooting range, and like Julie suggested, all the others would still fall under the TABC rules of distances
Yes.
with schools and everything.
Yep.
Exactly.
Okay. And then leaving the third as is?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Next slide.
Decision time. So we do have some slides to take a deeper dive into kennels. We have some slides to take a deeper dive into, Councilmember Lofgren brought up wanting to talk about parkland dedication, talk about billboards. And there's one more I'm missing, something else.
Parking.
And parking. So we have 30 minutes before it's 4 o'clock. We can do one of two things. One, we can end this conversation now so that we have 30 minutes to hear on at least one more topic, which is the stormwater drainage rate study, because we do have consultants that are in town, from out of town, to talk about that. So I would like to give them some time to do that, and simply pick back up on some of these things at the next council meeting, or we, of course, go past 4 o'clock.
We're gonna have to take up these other ones at other council meetings, but we're gonna have to take them in small segments. We all have a lot to talk about on all these items. We can list them all every time, but I don't want to spend, because this one, just this one topic here was an hour, right? And we obviously all have a lot of input to put into it, and we got a little bit more work to do on this section of UDO stuff. So let's list it on items to talk about, but we don't have to hit all of them, but let's start chipping away at these other items as we go.
Sure. Well, and I do
Everybody okay
suspect,
with that?
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do suspect we've tackled the biggest one where there's differences. I do suspect that the remaining items will go much quicker. But to your point, we'll take one at a time, and we can make that judgment call, at that meeting, whether, we continue or move on. So, but for now, we've got some really good direction on the separation piece, which is huge. So we'll be prepared to update that for next time. Recall that per schedule, we have the second reading of the UDO coming up next week at our regular council meeting. I did mention.
Move that.
You would have to vote to table that.
Yep.
Next week. But yes, you could certainly do that. And Mayor, I know you weren't at the most recent meeting, but I did verbalize to council that the time between these readings was, of course, solely up to y'all's discretion. And so, if next week you decide to table the second reading, that's of course your prerogative. But we will have it on the agenda so that we can give you that option and also continue the conversation, and then we just take it from there.
Okay.
Do we have an estimated timeline on, are we looking at adopting this in February, in May, in whenever?
I don't want to put a time on it.
Okay.
I want to get through the issues that we have across, and I think we have them all identified for the most part on the issues that we still need to talk with the UDO as a group. And just, time today, we're not going to get through all of them. And we'll just work through them at each at council meeting. I'm not trying to string it out a long time. I'm just trying to be mindful of the consultants we have here today. And that's why I'm thinking, hopefully we can get through all the items this next meeting. Maybe we can get to a second reading vote with the amendments, but I'm not going to commit to, we're going to get the second reading done next time, because I don't know if we're going to get through all the issues.
Sure.
If y'all also
And
want
it's important to get it right? As right as possible.
right as
I
possible.
mean, it's a big deal, so we certainly understand that. You brought up, believing that all the issues have come up. I do think that there's probably some other topics that I know came up in Julie's meeting with Mr. Swearingen this morning I know that Councilmember Crocker met, I think, with Mr. Swearingen as well, and maybe you did as well, Mayor.
No,
So
I
if there are other topics that we need to study, look into, please let us know, after the meeting or early next week, just so that we can make sure that we're as prepared as today to talk about these items, and we're not necessarily caught off guard, on the spot.
And to kind of piggyback off that, if you give us those items, then I can have some red line versions that'll make those discussions go a lot quicker. I mean, like I said, I met with Mr. Swearingen for 2 hours, and I already have some red lines that I'll just propose in the next ordinance because they're, good ideas. And so that can maybe also condense some of these conversations.
Okay, great.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Chance. I think we're good.
I do have one request.
go for
I
it.
think you'll have this whole presentation handy. It's got some suggestions on some of the other topics too, so that's a handy thing for you to flip through between now and
Okay.
next meeting.
That'd be great. Thank you, Chance. Merry Christmas.
Good idea.
Okay, so last topic of the day is, of course, an update, and we want to try and get some direction from you as well on the ongoing stormwater and utility rate study.
Email.
And who's going to?
So we'll get
Gilbert,
Chance-
you want to,
We'll get Chance's email to us,
I'm sorry?
his presentation?
Yes, you have a
Okay.
physical copy, but we will send it out electronically as well. You should, or do you not?
Oh, is this one? Okay.
Here it is.
Yeah, right here.
Thank you.
We
Or
have,
maybe it's just me.
we have them.
No, got it.
Council, we want to continue to have this conversation with you. We had it last time at the previous council meetings about, how we go about looking at these items. And we think it's very important because this is a new venture we're looking into on a drainage stormwater rate. So I think it behooves us to listen more about, from a high level, what are some of the components that y'all would like to see, or what are the normal standard operating things that it's normal practice for everything else. So I'm not going to talk anymore. I'm going to let Dave Matthews, so many Matthews, talk with y'all. Go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, appreciate the opportunity to be here. You should all have a copy of the PowerPoint, so you have a copy of that. There's also a handout, it's called the Stormwater Utility Trends in Texas. This is something our firm put together. It's got a lot of graphs, not a lot of words, but it gives some good information as to requirements legally, what other communities do. So it's kind of a good, kind of Stormwater 101 document. What I want to do at this meeting today is, as Gil mentioned, we just want to present to you what some of the different rate options are with regard to residential and commercial rates. So I'm going to hit a couple items real quick as a reminder. Again, I was here on November 7th and presented to you, but I'm going to hit a couple things on stormwater utilities, why you set them up, just a couple slides, and then Matthew's going to come up. He's going to talk about the residential and commercial rate structures, and then he's going to talk about some examples of what other cities have done. Those are things that then you can kind of think about, well, does that fit what we want to do in Victoria? We don't need feedback from you today. If you give it to us, that's fine, but we will have additional meetings going forward, so we just want to start you thinking on some of these things. And then finally, there are some exemptions that are, some are required by the law that Matthew will get into, certain types of facilities. And then there are others that you have the option whether you want to give an exemption to or not. Matthew will explain that more. So again, I'm just going to hit the first items again, why you're creating a stormwater utility and the purpose of it, and then he'll get into the fees and exemptions, and then I'll just wrap up with next steps. We've got about 8 or 10 slides. I'll go pretty quickly. Okay, I guess you got to keep clicking. So again, one of the reasons for the creation of the stormwater utility, just like so many other things, been listening to your CIP, the capital projects for stormwater, wastewater, these are basic services, the quality of life for your community. And so just like you have water, wastewater, Solid waste services, stormwater is a critical one that when you get those heavy rain events, you're able to move the water away from areas to minimize and avoid flooding and damage. So the purpose of the utility is, again, to come up with a mechanism, a user fee mechanism, to fund the programs that you need, the maintenance activities. And so one of the things we'll be doing is coming up with a funding mechanism for the stormwater utility. And the purpose of that is to come up with a mechanism that allows you to recover the costs of operating a stormwater utility. Personnel, equipment, materials. You know, you talked about some of the stormwater projects in your CIP. You know, how are you going to pay for those? This can be an option. One of the critical things, and Matthew's going to go to right after this slide, is when you come up with a fee mechanism, it has to be easy to understand, it has to be equitable, and it should be defensible. So one of the key things we'll be doing is looking at the customer characteristics. That's getting into the GIS and the parcel database for all the properties, and making sure we come up with and propose to you some equitable rate recommendations. So he's going to come up now and talk about some of the different rate options, and those are things you can start thinking about what makes sense for your city down the road.
All right, thank you, Dave. Howdy, Mayor, members of council. I'm Matthew Garrett. Pleasure to meet you. Sorry I wasn't here at the last one. Do want to talk about some of the options that council has. I've done this in a number of communities, dozen or so I have an opinion. We also have a proposal that's laid out what we would have proposed and what we are doing. We'll talk about those pieces. But I do want you to know there are some other opportunities in setting this fee. So as Dave discussed, this is a utility. Utilities are generally funded by revenues from fees. As you set that fee, we do have to comply with local government code statute 552, subchapter C technically. And so you'll see some language that's driven straight from the book, right, or from the text, and some other things that we have come up with in the industry. So relative to the residential fee, what we expect you may resolve to do is a flat residential fee. And so unlike water service, where we're selling units of water through meter sizes of different sizes, unlike transportation that's sized by the throughput or the total need of a property, right? What we're really doing here is conveying water away, and that is dictated primarily by the impervious cover. That's going to be concrete, and there are some pervious concretes, but taking that into account, we have rooftops, sidewalks, accessory structures, etc., that generate an impervious cover. That equates to some level of runoff, right? And so that's actually what we're doing on every property, regardless of residential and commercial. So when we look at our residential customers, we would look at across, and Wolpert, Melvin Spinks is here, his firm will actually be assisting with this. We will be looking down an aerial image at the impervious cover of all the rooftops, all right? And it won't be all manual labor. There'll be a fancy computer in the background running an algorithm. But with that, we're going to get the median or average, depending on where we fall, impervious cover per home, right? That will then become an equivalent residential unit. And so that's what you see here, that the flat residential rate, let's call it $4, would be the ERU rate. That's going to carry forward and apply to commercial, because one thing the statute requires is that you charge this equitably. But for the exemptions, those mandatory and discretionary, the mandate is that we do this equitably, right? And so that's our unit of measure, effectively, is the impervious cover. Does that make sense? Fantastic. Other options, you could do a tiered residential rate. So if we were to outline the impervious cover, again, from the Wolpert's output, and determine that you have very small lots. Maybe you have tiny homes in some part of town. Then you've got your normal, and then you've got the mega homes with the tennis court and whatever else creates a lot of impervious. Council could, if you chose, create tiered rates such that you have, small, medium, and large. You'll see in the trends report, some have gone to the extent of having, I think, 7 tiered rates. Something we don't recommend. I think it's administratively burdensome, something Dave touched on, to actually differentiate. And then when you do add an accessory structure, a mother-in-law suite, are you now bumping up to some new impervious category? So again, not one I'd recommend, but it is an option, and it's done in the state. Otherwise, you could charge by meter. I'm helping one community right now change this. They're currently charging a 2-inch 8 times the factor because that's the equivalency factor on the meter. Unfortunately, the statute actually wrote that in as an option, and some have taken advantage of that, even though there's really no nexus between water runoff and the meter serving the property. Otherwise, you could have a flat charge per account. You could make no difference at all between your residential and commercial, and every connection pays $2. And then lastly, there are some communities that charge at the residential level every parcel differently. Currently working with Houston, they're doing that, and it is very onerous to understand the actual square feet per property. Not something I would recommend for you. Okay. All right, so some example rates. So we supported, or are supporting all 4 of these. So in Seguin, we did a $3 flat rate to all residents. In Bernie, we did a $4 flat rate. In Georgetown currently is at $6.50. They're reviewing it now. In Houston, again, I talked about them having very specific rates. They further differentiate their residential class by saying, in front of your property, are you served by curb and gutter or open ditch? If so, you pay a rate differential as shown above. So again, I wouldn't suggest we complicate it, but it can be done. And before I get away from residential, any detailed residents, maybe your focus group as a council as well. Any detailed questions? Anything I need to touch on? No?
I have a question.
Oh, yes, sir.
He's not sitting here, but I thought I may interject a couple of questions. Is that Seguin, Bernie, and Georgetown, the reason why they have that type of structure or number that you're seeing there is because they have a different level of maintenance program or operational. Because as y'all might recall, we were planning to start this in a slow process, not jump into it. So I want to make sure that they have a full-blown process already established. Sure. That's why you see these numbers the way they are.
Yes, sir. In part. So one good example in Bernie. Bernie's charge is $3. Just like you already do something for stormwater. You saw it in your capital plans, and you don't have this fee today. So clearly you can fund some stormwater activities. So in Bernie, they looked at this $3 piece as an add-on to what they were already doing. And so that finance director in that community said, I want to see it all in one fund, but that fund receives $3 and whatever commercial pays as one revenue source. It also receives the existing funding from general fund and other sources, whether that be the utility helping, et cetera, all go into this one stormwater fund. So in Bernie, as one example, they actually have funded part of their need, just as you may choose to fund part of your need. For instance, if part of your INS rate today, your interest in sinking on tax, does touch on stormwater infrastructure you've already put in place, you would not have to come and fund that from this new fee. So that's a great question that you can do this a number of ways. Clearly, each of these, and Georgetown's one in particular, that has substantial growth demands, they have substantial operational needs, and so they are looking at changing their service level. And I believe this was in one of Dave's slides. This is just a function of the council's preference for what service level do you want to attain in stormwater management. I saw some of your 5-year CIP had a 5-year rain event. That is one bar, right? You could also apply other bars. How often do you want to get out to do vegetation management on your creek beds? How often do you want to do this, that, or the other? The good part about this fee, and the reason I like working with stormwater so much, it can give you as the council and your business community and your residents confidence. The uses are restricted to statute, the funds would be segregated, and we know we're going to use it on those dedicated purposes. So when you say we want a higher level of service, those funds must go towards those ends, right? All right.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you have a set rate for your stormwater and then your water. Would it be combined in our bill, or are you going to ask us to have 2 separate bills so that way you keep your funds separate, or?
No, it'd be one
Okay,
billing cycle. Yeah, it'd be on the bill.
okay,
Format might change up how you read it, what's what, but it'd be one bill.
okay, and then y'all separate it here in-house?
Yes,
Okay.
internally.
All right, so moving to commercial, another class of customer. We spend a lot of time talking about impervious cover on residential because that ERU value I mentioned sets the foundation. If we're going to set our rates to commercial or non-residential properties equitably with the way we're charging our residents, we would then need to know the impervious cover for the commercial property and then effectively divide that by whatever the ERU is. So a simple example, if your ERU value, your square feet of impervious cover normal for a resident is 2,500 square feet, and you have a commercial property, we'll say a Dollar General that's 10,000 square feet, they would pay 4 times whatever the resident pays. Super fair, super easy. Oh, I apologize. Am I too loud? Screaming at people? Oh, I'm not getting loud enough.
Can't hear you.
My apologies. My fear was I was speaking too loudly. Oh, fair enough. I haven't heard that often. I'll take it. So some other opportunities. If you were not to use the impervious cover, which is that first bullet for commercial, and rely on the ERU or equivalent residential unit for the residential class, you could look at a gross area basis. So barring the impervious surface, barring how much runoff that property may take, a 17-acre property would pay more than a 2-acre property. Right? So you could look at land area alone. I wouldn't advise it, but it's an option. Another non-area basis goes back to those meter charges we were talking about. And so if you take into account the commercial property's meter size, that is not based on area. One other thing I have seen on fee options is the ultimate fee charged for certain properties throughout a community may seem very high. Now, it's equitable, but I have seen a few councils actually come and cap that amount. The difficulty when you cap an amount on a commercial property is you have some genuine, let's say it's a high cap of $1,000 a month. If council were to cap $1,000 a month on one property, some actual properties should be paying $950 based on their area, and some large commercial properties should be paying $15,000, but they're capped to 1. So again, I was asked to show you a number of examples. These are things that ultimately you will contemplate when we bring this back with more answers about impervious area, more answers about the cost, and additionally more options for you to consider. Additionally, you'll see, and this is in that same trends report, the impervious area basis is about 84%. This was a sample of about 76 communities. So about 84% of those sampled used the impervious area basis. So as scoped with your staff, that is what the Wolpert team plans to do, and that's the commercial structure we would propose, apart from other direction from yourself or staff. All right, so commercial, some other fee examples. In Seguin, we did the $3 per ERU, but you'll see their ERU there is 2,500 square feet. So too in the trends report, you'll see this ranges all over the state. In Bernie, it's $4 per ERU, but an ERU is equal to 4,700. So take the example of, well, let's just say a 10,000 square foot property and put it in Seguin and put it in Bernie. Despite the dollar differential, you may pay more if you're in Seguin. Right. Another important thing is that regardless of the business size, if it has property of its own, I think of like an ice kiosk or the coffee station that's subdivided within a larger parcel, but it's its own entity. You may choose, regardless of its size, to charge them one minimum ERU value. Makes sense because even if you had a tiny home, you'd likely charge them one ERU. So you'll see that on 3 of these. And then lastly, you'll see Houston again continues the plan per 1,000 square feet. What they don't do here in Houston is recognize the difference between service from open ditch and curb and gutter on the commercial property. All right, with no questions on the fees, we do have a number of mandatory exemptions, so of course we'll have to look through your records, work with staff to identify correctly your state agencies and the like. Unimproved lots, it's assumed that they are not triggering enough runoff to build them, so it's an unimproved lot. There's very specific language in bullet 2 here. So lots with, and then quote, wholly sufficient and privately owned drainage systems would be exempt. I'm often asked what this means. I often say I've never seen one, because the idea is that they would not produce runoff that comes off their property. And without a definition in statute as to what rain event that is that, was it a 98 flood? I can't recall the year here.
98.
Yeah, so whatever that is for you, is that a 100-year, a 200-year rain event? Or are we talking about the 2-year rain event? Since that's not well defined, I think it doesn't exist. But that's why it is in statute, so I have to put it on there. And then public institutions of higher education. Discretionary exemptions, you'll see those listed out. The last one's interesting with cemeteries closed to new internments. Yes, sir.
For council benefit, back to your private owner.
Excuse me. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Jesus Reina. I just want to make sure council understands that private owner drainage system. Take, for example, we have an apartment complex and on John Stock Bar. I don't know the name of it right top of my head, but they have a big pond in front as a reservoir. They're not really technically exempt, because the only way they can exempt, if they can prove somehow there's zero runoff.
Yes, sir. My opinion, without being an attorney, is that they would have the burden of proof to show.
We got plenty, don't worry
Yeah,
about it.
fair enough. But yeah, generally, you have your own design standards that say, when you're going to build on this nice, beautiful patch of grass, you have to do something about that additional runoff to not, adversely affect your neighbors. So that level of meeting that criteria doesn't mean you're wholly sufficient. When it rains and the runoff of the egress is effectively coming back into your roadway and then down your channels, by virtue of that alone, they're not wholly sufficient.
That also, for instance, a detention pond would ultimately run off as opposed to a retention pond. So, I mean, the privately and the wholly sufficient would be retention and never letting a drop off the property.
That's my understanding. What I see as wholly sufficient is a very high bar, and I haven't understood it to be met by any property. But sir, you were coming up.
And I'll just touch on this, which there are some properties that have retention basins, but there is always part of their property that runs off into our storm drainage system. Very, like he said, I don't know of any in our community that has solely honed, I mean, everything goes in and it never touches our system.
Thank you.
And the last thing I'll share in
Or a neighbor.
Or a neighbor, fair enough. Yeah, exactly. The other thing that often is brought up when this comes up, perhaps during a public hearing or something else, that's where I've heard this before. Basically, once they come off of that property into your roadway, they're using part of your drainage system. Your roads act as a part of your conveyance. They also have drainage and the curb and gutter and the box outlets, things that help them traverse to get to their property are to their benefit as well. And so we all benefit from not having flooded roads. So again, it is sort of a slippery slope once you start asking how far is far, what does wholly mean? But those are the few examples I can share. All right, with that, I was asked to talk about a few discretionary examples. Oh, go ahead, sir.
No, I was going to ask you to walk through the discretionary ones.
Certainly.
I don't want to assume.
Fair enough. So county properties, these are discretionary, so at the preference of council. You could exempt yourself, you could exempt the county, you could exempt school districts. It's also open enrollment charter schools if you want to extend to that. Tax exempt religious organizations and cemeteries closed to new internments, so no more burials at that site. Again, an odd definition, but it's in there. All right. All right, now relative to these discretionary examples, here are some of the folks we've worked with and just a few more added to the bottom. You'll see Seguin, we did not have a discretionary exemption when we put that in place. In Bernie, we actually phased in the school district. This one I like. I'm a recovering finance director. I did that prior to coming into consulting. And I love my school districts, and I know they do a biennial budget. So they may not be able to turn on a dime and start a new fee with us the first year we put it in place. So in Bernie, they phased this in. Now, you as a council could choose not to hit them at all in first year, half the next, and choose your own percentages. But because the state allows for that discretionary exemption, you have a lot of autonomy in choosing what to do with the school district. I will add they don't typically pay taxes to help for the road or drainage otherwise. So if I need a good and a bad, those are the conflicts related to the school district. So here we have, similar in Bernie, they phased it in Georgetown, the home of Southwestern University. They've actually exempted public or private institutions of higher learning. In Houston, we have county property, public or private, tax exempt. And then very uniquely, they had a very special, Build Houston or Rebuild Houston program. But without going into the detail, that date, April 6, 2011, was a very important date, and they effectively grandfathered in certain properties that could be exempted if they were vertical before that date. Lastly, you'll see Richardson and Fredericksburg very similar, except Fredericksburg is my only example with cemeteries included, so I put it on there. All
And at what point throughout this process do you need confirmation from the city and council on which exceptions? Because I imagine that's something that you need sooner rather than later, so that as you develop, all the forecasting models, you know what to leave out.
That's a wonderful question. So as Wolpert and their team analyzes the entire footprint of your service area, your city limit boundaries, they're going to look at all of the parcels. And so we can actually take that feedback all the way through the end. But what we would like to know is if you already know you're exempting some, I'd never like to include it in your revenue potential. But let's say you're waffling as a council and you don't know who you want to exempt. We can have those specifically and discreetly presented at the end of this with guaranteed residential, guaranteed non-residential, automatically exempt. I'm never going to show you dollars for that. And then a pie per slice, and we can kind of say, here are the discretionaries, and you can choose whether or not you want to include that in your total. But a great question. All right. Any others?
Does that approach sound okay?
I was going to interject something else. Our intent was to not wait to the end to get that input. Through the process, before we get to even halfway, we would like to have that input. So the whole purpose, like the example today, is to start thinking. So maybe a couple of months from now, say, okay, councilors, what do you think about this now? That is when, we need to get some feedback, stuff like that. We don't want to wait to the end. It's going to take a long, anyway, this whole process, it's going to take about a year just to get the stormwater. So I'm not saying in a couple of months, I misspoke, but it's just to get the mind rolling. Don't be surprised, in the middle of the year, we come back, okay, we need some feedback now. So how do you think we should start approaching these items? So we don't wait to the end.
We'll ask you again in March.
Yeah. Anyway, last comment. I think we're planning to bring forward, I don't want to miss, Dave, you might jump in here, that we're planning to bring out the best practice option to you too as well. And then from there, we bring these other options that y'all suggesting, do this, do that, and do that, okay?
Yeah, thanks.
So you have something to look at, not just one. So we want to give you a little menu to look at as well.
And just because it was brought up, the retention, you were talking about retention ponds. I'll give two examples where you think, oh, they've got a retention pond, so they're taking care of theirs. A lot of those are set up, if you look at them, with overflow, and they go into the city systems. I mean, where our home is, with 40 homes 20 years ago, they built a retention facility for it. But once it caps over, it goes into the city system. Our office complex has a retention facility. As soon as it goes over the top, it goes into the city system. So you really got to look where the water's going. So it goes back to not meeting that standard. It just manages the water coming out. Okay, so very quickly, next steps. So we're going to be setting up internally a kickoff meeting. New Gen, our folks, Wolpert and the city, we're going to start putting together the timeline, starting to get into this project. That's where we're going to start. One of the key things we'll be looking at is we have to get into the data, the quality of the data. That's where Wolpert will be working on that piece. We're going to be working on the financial forecast and building out a cost of service. One of the things we'll be doing then is coming up with different what-ifs. To Matthew's point, and some of these things, exempt, not exempt, what have you, we'll run different what-ifs. We'll have discussions with you through the process because we do want you to give us feedback on the type of fee structure. We can give you our opinions and what we think is good and defensible, but ultimately, you're the folks that live here. We want a system that works for you and what your goals are. And then, so we'll come up in steps 4 and 5, there will be continued public input and discussion to go through, and then there's required public hearings with them also. So that's the process. Appreciate it. We've gone a little long. Any questions?
No, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you making the drive. Sorry we kept you so late, too. Merry Christmas to y'all.
Thank you.
Mr. Garza?
We're good. As I alluded to earlier, the last item, which is to go through the eminent domain process, we'll just pick that back up at a regular council meeting here in the near future.
Okay, with that, we are adjourned.